The glass-walled conference room on the 52nd floor of Sterling Technologies had witnessed 14 failures that morning.
I wish
Rebecca
we could
Sterling
fly
sat
to
at the
the
head of the
moon
polished
together.
mahogany table spine, rigid as rebar gray eyes moving across each candidate with the mechanical precision of quality control software flagging defects. Beside her, 6-year-old Sophia occupied an oversized leather chair like a small ghost haunting furniture built for corporate titans. The child's hands rested folded in her lap, fingers' motionless gaze fixed on something beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed downtown Indianapolis in autumn light. Candidate 14, a woman with a Yale credential and 20 years of pediatric speech therapy experience, gathered her portfolio with hands that trembled slightly. She'd lasted 11 minutes. The door whispered shut behind her, sealing the room in silence, broken only by the climate control system's steady hum. Grace Chen appeared at Rebecca's elbow tablet, glowing with the next appointment file. Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried the weight of apology. One more. Marcus Kane. He's not what we discussed. Rebecca's jaw tightened. 18 months of this, 18 months of specialists with degrees from institutions that charged tuition equivalent to luxury sedans. 18 months of evidence-based interventions and progressive desensitization protocols and structured therapeutic approaches that produced exactly nothing. The invoice folder in her desk drawer had crossed 6 figures 3 months ago. None of it had coaxed a single word from her daughter's throat. Another one with a PhD in child development. Grace's pause lasted a fraction too long. Actually, he's a carpenter. He was supposed to come yesterday, but send him in. Rebecca turned back to the window, watching Monument Circle far below, where autumn tourists clustered around the war memorial like ants circling dropped food. She'd built Sterling Technologies from a garage startup to Fortune 500 status in 15 years. She'd negotiated contracts with venture capitalists who viewed women CEOs as amusing novelties. She'd tripled her late father's revenue projections and proved every skeptical board member wrong. She could evaluate a quarterly earnings report in 90 seconds and identify the exact paragraph where creative accounting began, but she couldn't make her daughter speak. Sophia shifted in the chair, adjusting Winston's ears with delicate precision. The stuffed elephant had been a gift from James before. Back when Sophia's laughter filled their Meridian Hills penthouse like music from speakers Rebecca had forgotten existed. Back when the word mama wasn't a memory that lived exclusively in security footage timestamps. The door opened. Marcus Kane stepped into the conference room wearing work boots that tracked sawdust across imported marble. His denim jacket bore the particular fade pattern that came from years of actual labor rather than designer distressing. Calloused hands hung at his sides with the stillness of someone accustomed to holding power tools. He was late. He was entirely wrong for this position. Rebecca opened her mouth to end the interview before it began. Then he knelt. Not in the choreographed way the Yale specialist had attempted, that calculated descent designed to establish non-threatening body language while maintaining professional distance. Marcus Kane simply dropped to one knee with the fluid economy of a man whose joints remembered this position from 1,000 job sites, bringing his weathered face level with Sophia's. He raised his hands. His fingers moved through shapes Rebecca didn't recognize. Fluid motions that seemed to carry weight despite producing no sound. He formed configurations in the air between himself and the child, offering something Rebecca couldn't name, but Sophia could apparently read like text on a screen. The little girl's eyes snapped to his hands. It was the first eye contact Rebecca had witnessed all morning. 14 candidates had employed every recommended technique, play therapy approaches, structured engagement protocols, gentle redirection strategies, and Sophia had looked through all of them like they were made of glass. But this carpenter's hands commanded her complete attention with a gravity that bypassed conscious thought. Rebecca froze coffee cup halfway to her lips. The porcelain rattled against the saucer. Marcus Kane's hands shaped more signs. His fingers spelled out meanings in a language built from silence. He didn't smile or perform or deploy any of the rehearsed warmth that characterized professional childcare specialists. He simply waited, palms suspended in midair, offering connection without demanding response. Sophia's fingers twitched. The movement was microscopic. A tremor in her right hand quickly suppressed, but Marcus saw it. He repeated his gesture more slowly, breaking the motion into component parts like a carpenter demonstrating how a joint fits together. Sophia's hands lifted from her lap. Her small fingers fumbled through an approximation of his shape, clumsy, uncertain, the manual equivalent of a first grader sounding out unfamiliar words. But she was trying. For the first time since the parade of credentialed experts had begun that morning, Sophia Sterling was actively engaging with another human being. Marcus corrected her gently, repositioning her fingers with the careful precision of someone who understood that forcing correction destroys willingness to learn. His weathered hands guided her small ones through the proper configuration. She attempted it again, better this time. Her third try was nearly perfect. Then something extraordinary happened. The corner of Sophia's mouth curved upward. Not a full smile, nothing that obvious. Just a ghost of the expression her face had almost forgotten how to make. A flicker of light in a room that had been dark for 2 years. Rebecca's hands shook badly enough that coffee spilled across quarterly projections she'd been reviewing. The liquid spread through columns of data like blood seeping through gauze. Grace materialized beside her with impossible speed. Should I end this? He doesn't have any of the required certifications. His background check is still pending. We could politely... Where did you learn that? Rebecca's voice came out wrong, cracked in the middle like badly fired pottery. Marcus Kane looked up from his silent conversation with Sophia, meeting Rebecca's stare with eyes that had seen things credentials couldn't prepare anyone for. I had a daughter. She was deaf. Past tense. The words landed in Rebecca's chest with the impact of a diagnosis delivered in clinical language designed to cushion unbearable truth. What happened? Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Memory moving like shadows under ice. She died when she was 4. He delivered the information without self-pity or dramatic pause. Simple statement of fact spoken the way another man might report yesterday's weather, but Rebecca heard the compressed weight behind those 6 words, the grief that had been packed down and sealed under scar tissue thick enough to permit continued function. Grace appeared at Rebecca's shoulder again, tablet displaying Marcus Kane's employment history. The screen showed a 3-year gap between positions, a crater in the resume that would normally disqualify any candidate before the interview stage. Pull his file. Everything you can find. Rebecca moved toward the glass wall separating the conference room from her private office, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene unfolding behind her. Marcus and Sophia continued their silent exchange. The little girl's posture had transformed completely. Her shoulders, which had been hunched forward in defensive protection, relaxed by degrees. She leaned toward this stranger, with an openness Rebecca hadn't witnessed since before the accident on I-90 that had killed James and stolen Sophia's voice. Thomas Whitmore materialized in the office doorway like a bad quarter in circulation that kept returning. His silver hair caught the afternoon light streaming through windows that overlooked Monument Circle. 63 years of Connecticut breeding and Yale networking had taught him to fill door frames with authority, despite possessing the physical presence of an aging economics professor. Is this some kind of joke? His voice carried the particular edge of a man who'd spent 4 decades on corporate boards where his opinion shaped outcomes. Rebecca turned to face him, positioning her body between Thomas and the conference room where Marcus was teaching Sophia signs for what appeared to be various animals. He has no credentials, Rebecca. No degree, no certifications, no... He made her laugh. That's not a qualification. Then what is... Thomas's jaw tightened. His fingers whitened around the crystal tumbler of scotch he carried despite the morning hour, a privilege he'd claimed after 20 years as her father's business partner, and another 15 on Sterling Technologies' board of directors. Professional expertise, documented experience, institutional oversight, things that protect both the child and the company from liability exposure that could get out. The words emerged with less volume than Rebecca intended, but more finality. Thomas's expressions cycled through surprise, indignation, and calculation, before settling on the patient condescension of a man explaining basic concepts to someone experiencing temporary irrationality. "We'll discuss this at the board meeting Thursday." He departed with the unhurried pace of someone certain time would prove him correct. The door closed with a click that sounded like a threat being filed for later use. Rebecca moved into her private office, gesturing for Marcus to follow. Grace remained at her station, already compiling background information with the efficient urgency of someone who'd learned to anticipate her employer's needs before they were articulated. The office was 1,500 square feet of corner real estate, featuring abstract art that had cost more than most people's annual salary, and a desk imported from Denmark at shipping fees equivalent to a used car. Marcus entered without apparent intimidation, his work boots leaving faint sawdust traces across carpet woven in Nepal. He stood with the same patient stillness he'd displayed in the conference room, hands loose at his sides, waiting. Rebecca picked up the framed photograph from her desk. James smiled at the camera, one arm around 4-year-old Sophia at the Indianapolis Zoo, both of them covered in cotton candy residue and joy. The image lived in a drawer now too painful to display, too precious to discard. "Your husband," she hadn't intended to share that information this early in the interview process. The word emerged before professional distance could prevent it. "He died 2 years ago. Car accident on I-90. Marcus accepted this information with a small nod, the gesture of someone who recognized grief's topography from personal navigation. "I'm sorry." The condolence was brief, devoid of the elaborate sympathy that usually followed such revelations. Rebecca appreciated the economy. Sophia was in the car. Understanding crossed Marcus's face like sunrise breaking over flat terrain. He didn't offer platitudes about trauma or healing timelines or the resilience of children. He simply waited, giving her space to continue or conclude as she chose. Rebecca set James's photo down facing her, a small act of confrontation with the past she'd been avoiding since the accident, turned her family into a before and after comparison. "Tell me about your daughter." Marcus shifted his weight slightly, the only visible sign the question touched something tender. "Lily was born deaf. Congenital. We found out when she was 8 months old. Learned ASL together, me and my wife. Turned out I had an aptitude for it." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face, gone before it fully formed. "My father used to say good carpenters listen to wood. Lily taught me to listen to hands." "What happened to her?" "Heart defect. Congenital, like the deafness. They're linked, sometimes genetic syndrome. She made it to 4 years, 2 months and 16 days before her heart decided it was done." He delivered the timeline with the precision of someone who'd counted every hour. "Those 3 years in my employment record the gap your assistant noticed that was me being her full-time caregiver. Her mother left when Lily was 18 months. Said she couldn't handle raising a disabled child." The words carried no bitterness, just the flat reportage of facts that couldn't be changed by emotional processing. "After Lily died, I volunteered at Riverside School for the Deaf. Taught woodworking to older kids for 2 years. Grief had to go somewhere useful." Rebecca studied him across 6 feet of office space and an immeasurable distance of shared loss. This man understood something the credentialed specialists couldn't access through textbooks or clinical hours. He knew what it meant to love someone who communicated outside conventional channels. He'd learned a language most people never encountered because someone he loved required it. "Sophia isn't deaf. She can hear perfectly well. Her doctors say verbal communication therapy is the appropriate approach. Structured intervention, progressive desensitization to speaking situations. Marcus glanced back through the glass wall toward the conference room, where Sophia sat with Winston, her hands moving in private conversation with the stuffed elephant. "With respect, ma'am, I'm not sure those doctors have ever tried listening to her." The statement landed like a hammer striking a nail Rebecca hadn't realized was exposed. Her spine straightened with the defensive reflex of someone unaccustomed to being challenged by employees, particularly employees who installed kitchen cabinets for hourly wages. "I've listened to every expert in 3 states. I've read every peer-reviewed study on selective mutism. I've implemented every evidence-based intervention available." "I wasn't talking about evidence-based interventions. I was talking about listening. Actually, listening, meeting her where she is, instead of trying to drag her somewhere she doesn't want to go." Heat rose in Rebecca's chest. This stranger with sawdust on his jeans was standing in her office questioning her approach to her own child. The arrogance was staggering. The presumption was unforgivable. She could terminate this interview in 15 seconds and have Grace escort him from the building before his boots tracked any more debris across Danish carpet. But Sophia was still visible through the glass wall, and the ghost of that almost smile still lingered at the corners of her mouth. Grace returned with a tablet displaying Marcus Kane's complete background file. Rebecca scanned it with the speed reading efficiency that allowed her to process hundreds of documents daily. 36 years old, high school diploma from a small town outside Youngstown, Ohio, trade certification in carpentry, employed by Sullivan Construction for the past 4 years. Prior to that, the 3-year gap he'd explained. Before that, sporadic employment at various construction outfits across central Indiana. "There's a note here from his previous employer." Grace indicated a section near the bottom of the file. Rebecca read it twice, confirming she'd understood correctly. Marcus Kane volunteered at Riverside School for the Deaf from 2021 to 2023. Taught woodworking to students ages 10 to 17. Director's personal commendation attached. "Mr. Kane has a gift for reaching children who have given up on being reached. His patience and skill transformed our woodshop program. Several students who were previously disengaged found purpose through his instruction. He treats every child as if they have something valuable to say regardless of how they say it." Rebecca looked up from the tablet. Marcus hadn't elaborated on his volunteer work or referenced this commendation. He'd simply stated facts, leaving others to draw conclusions. "Why did you apply for this position?" "Tommy Sullivan, my foreman, saw the listing. Said it sounded like something I'd be good at." Marcus's expression remained neutral. "I wasn't sure I could do it again. Work with a kid who needed what Lily needed. But Tommy said grief makes you useful, or it makes you useless, and I'd done enough of the second option." The honesty was refreshing in its lack of polish. No rehearsed answers about passion for childcare or commitment to making a difference. Just a man admitting he wasn't certain he could handle the emotional weight of helping another child after losing his own. Rebecca walked to the window overlooking Monument Circle 52 floors below. Afternoon sun caught the War Memorial's bronze at angles that turned metal into liquid gold. Tourists moved across the plaza in patterns that probably made sense at ground level, but appeared random from this height. She'd spent 15 years building Sterling Technologies into a company that valued data over intuition metrics, over instinct, proven methodologies over experimental approaches. Every instinct she'd developed over those 15 years told her this was wrong. Marcus Kane had no credentials. He had no experience with selective mutism. He had no letters after his name. No certifications on his wall, no references from child development specialists. He was a carpenter who happened to know sign language because tragedy had forced him to learn it. His resume was grief. His qualification was loss. His teaching method was patience, born from loving someone who couldn't communicate in conventional ways. And yet Sophia's hands were moving again through the glass wall. Small gestures directed at Marcus, asking him something Rebecca couldn't understand. He responded without hesitation, his fingers forming shapes that made the little girl's eyes brighten with comprehension. 1 week. Rebecca heard herself speak before conscious decision made it to her executive function centers. The words emerged from some deeper place where maternal instinct still operated, despite 2 years of systematic failure. Trial basis. You'll submit to a full background check criminal financial references from every employer in the past decade. You'll sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You'll agree to supervised visits with security camera monitoring. If anything, and I mean anything, raises concerns, you'll be terminated immediately. Is that understood? Marcus nodded once. Understanding. Grace will provide you with the terms of employment. You'll start tomorrow morning, 7:45. Be early. She turned on her heel and walked toward the door, her back straight, her expression controlled in the way that had served her through countless board meetings and shareholder presentations. But just before she reached the threshold, she paused without turning around. Mr. Kane, what did you say to her that first thing when you walked in? What did it mean? Marcus's response was quiet, almost gentle. I told her she didn't have to talk if she didn't want to. I told her silence isn't something to be ashamed of. Rebecca didn't reply. She stepped through the door and let it close behind her, leaving her daughter in the care of a man she'd known for less than an hour. It was the most irrational decision she'd made in her entire professional life. It was also, though she didn't know it yet, the first step toward learning a language she'd never thought to study. The apartment Marcus returned to that evening occupied the second floor of a brick building in Fountain Square that predated interstate highways. The neighborhood had cycled through industrial prosperity post-manufacturing decline and recent gentrification that pushed rent higher while leaving the bones of poverty visible in cracked sidewalks and corner stores with bars on the windows. His one-bedroom unit featured a kitchen with appliances from 3 different decades and a living room window that overlooked a parking lot where Tommy's truck idled with its hazards blinking. Tommy Sullivan sat on the apartment's only couch, a corduroy monstrosity Marcus had found on a curb in 2019 with 2 Budweisers sweating condensation rings into the coffee table he'd built from reclaimed barn wood. 42 years of Irish-American genetics had given Tommy the build of a man who'd spent his life lifting things heavier than OSHA recommended, along with red hair that was staging a fighting retreat toward his collar. He looked up when Marcus entered expression, cycling through curiosity and concern, before settling on the careful neutrality of someone preparing for bad news. How'd it go? Marcus dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, a ceramic piece Lily had made in an art therapy class 3 months before she died lopsided and beautiful. He pulled off his work boots and accepted the offered beer, draining a third of it before answering. I start tomorrow. Tommy's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. Seriously, the CEO lady hired you. I figured she'd take one look at your background check gap, and she saw Sophia respond to me. That was enough. Sophia's the kid. 6 years old. Hasn't spoken since she watched her father die in a car accident 2 years ago. Mother's been throwing money at specialists who keep trying to make her talk. Marcus set the beer down, pressing the cold bottle against his forehead. She's like Lily, not deaf, but silent for a reason. Trauma, not defiance. Tommy absorbed this information while picking at the label on his Budweiser. They'd worked together for 4 years, long enough for Tommy to recognize when Marcus was processing something painful. You gonna be okay with this? Working with another kid who can't talk? I don't know. The honesty sat between them like a third presence in the room. Marcus rose and moved to the closet where he stored things he couldn't look at regularly but couldn't discard. The cardboard box on the top shelf bore Lily's name in marker that had faded from black to gray. He'd sealed it the day after her funeral at Crown Hill and hadn't opened it since. His hands shook slightly as he lifted it down. Inside, ASL flashcards with her tiny handprints in paint on the backs. Children's books with sign language illustrations. Photographs of her at Riverside School surrounded by other deaf kids, her face illuminated with joy that transcended sound. A wooden toy elephant he'd carved for her 4th birthday, she'd named it Winston, after a character in a picture book. The name hit him like voltage through improperly grounded wiring. Sophia's stuffed elephant was also named Winston. Tommy appeared at his shoulder close enough to offer presence without invading space. He didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes about healing or closure or time's ability to soften loss. He simply stood there, solid as framing lumber, while Marcus touched artifacts from his daughter's abbreviated life. What if she gets attached and something happens? The question emerged without permission. Tommy's hand landed on Marcus's shoulder with the weight of brotherhood. What if you help her and nothing bad happens? That's not how my story goes, Tommy. Maybe it's time to write a different one. Marcus pulled out Lily's favorite flashcard set, Basic Signs for Family Home Love Safe. Her handprints decorated the backs in tempera paint preserved under laminate that had started to peel at the edges. He'd taught her these signs when she was 18 months old before she could walk steadily, but after she'd figured out that moving her hands could make her needs understood. The tears came without warning. No preamble. No gradual build. Just sudden wetness tracking down his face while he stared at paint handprints that would never grow larger. Tommy's grip on his shoulder tightened. Neither man spoke. The only sound in the apartment was the refrigerator's compressor cycling on in the kitchen and the muffled bass from the unit below where someone was playing music that made the floor vibrate. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving a damp streak across his wrist. First time I've opened this since we buried her. You gonna bring those for Sophia? Marcus looked at the flashcards, then at Tommy, then back at the cards bearing his dead daughter's handprints. Yeah, I think Lily would want that. Someone else learning what she taught me. They finished their beers in silence, while autumn darkness settled over Fountain Square and traffic noise from Virginia Avenue filtered through walls that were too thin to provide real insulation. Marcus repacked the box carefully, but he left it on the coffee table instead of returning it to the closet. Some doors once opened couldn't be closed again. His phone buzzed against the barn wood table. Text message from an unknown number. Can we talk tomorrow after Sophia's bedtime? Please, Rebecca Sterling. He stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. What time? The reply came within seconds. 8:30. I'll text you the address. Tommy raised an eyebrow. The CEO wants to talk after I put the kid to bed tomorrow. That's either really good or really bad. Marcus didn't respond because Tommy was right and there was nothing useful to say about uncertainty. He finished his beer and walked Tommy to the door, watching his foreman's taillights disappear down the street toward the modest house in Beech Grove where Kelly and Emma waited. Tommy Sullivan had the life Marcus was supposed to have, wife who stayed daughter who lived ordinary problems that didn't involve tiny coffins or signing conversations with ghosts. He stood at the window for a long time after Tommy left, looking out at Fountain Square's gentrifying storefronts and thinking about a 6-year-old girl who'd lost her voice the same way Lily had lost her hearing, through biology and circumstance that no one could control or correct. The difference was that Sophia's silence was a choice, even if the child didn't consciously understand it as such. Trauma had taught her that words were dangerous, that speaking led to loss, that silence was the only safe position in a world that could steal everything without warning. Marcus understood that logic more than any PhD-holding specialist ever could. He picked up Lily's flashcard set from the box and shuffled through them slowly, remembering her small hands forming each sign. Love, family, home, safe. Words she'd never speak aloud, but had communicated with perfect clarity through fingers and palms and gestures that required no sound to carry meaning. Tomorrow he would teach those same signs to another little girl who'd learned to fear her own voice. Tomorrow he would try to build something useful from the wreckage of his grief. Tomorrow he would walk back into Sterling Technologies and hope that Tommy was right about this being a different story with a different ending. But tonight, alone in his apartment with a beer bottle sweating condensation into reclaimed barnwood, Marcus Kane cried for the daughter who'd taught him that love doesn't require sound, only presence. And he cried for the daughter who wasn't his, who needed someone to meet her in the silence instead of demanding she abandon it. Outside his window, Fountain Square continued its uneven march toward renewal. Inside his chest, something that had been frozen for 2 years began tentatively to thaw. The grief remained. It would always remain. But maybe Tommy was right. Maybe grief could make you useful instead of useless. Maybe there was a way to honor Lily's memory that didn't require Marcus to stop living entirely. Maybe, just maybe, he could help one more child find her voice, even if that voice never made a sound. He set Lily's flashcards on the counter where he'd see them first thing in the morning. Then he went to bed and dreamed of small hands making big meanings in the spaces between words. The Sterling penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower in Meridian Hills, where wealth insulated itself from Indianapolis's grittier neighborhoods through elevation and security checkpoints. Marcus arrived at 7:40 Wednesday morning, carrying Lily's flashcard box, and the weight of a decision he still wasn't certain he could sustain. The doorman, a young guy with military posture and an earpiece, checked his ID against a tablet list before directing him to the private elevator that required a key card Rebecca had couriered to his apartment at 6 a.m. The doors opened directly into a living space that looked like it had been photographed for a magazine about people who'd forgotten what homes were supposed to feel like. Everything was white or gray, or that particular shade of beige that cost extra because it had been given a name like Grigi by consultants who charged hourly rates. Abstract art hung on walls at precisely measured intervals. Furniture occupied floor space with mathematical precision. The entire environment communicated money and taste and a complete absence of anyone actually living here. Sophia stood in the hallway leading to what Marcus assumed were bedrooms, still wearing pajamas decorated with elephants, clutching Winston against her chest like a shield. She watched him with dark eyes that assessed strangers the way prey animals evaluated potential threats, calculating distance, measuring exits, preparing for flight. Rebecca emerged from somewhere deeper in the penthouse wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back with the severity of someone preparing for combat. She carried a leather portfolio that looked heavy enough to contain either contracts or weapons. "You're early." "Always am." She handed him the portfolio without ceremony. 17 pages of employment contract printed on paper stock that felt expensive. He flipped through it quickly, scanning sections titled Confidentiality Obligations and Termination Conditions and Behavioral Expectations. The language was dense with the kind of legal hedging that turned simple concepts into paragraph-length sentences. At the bottom of page 17, a line awaited his signature. "You should read that carefully. I trust you." The words landed between them with unexpected weight. Rebecca blinked the only visible crack in her executive armor before recovering her composure. "You shouldn't trust anyone in business, Mr. Kane. This isn't business. This is your daughter." He signed each page without reading beyond the headers. Rebecca's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been relief before settling back into professional neutrality. She gathered the signed pages with hands that moved too quickly, revealing nervousness beneath control. "Sophia's schedule is posted in the kitchen. Dietary restrictions are documented. Therapy protocols are outlined in the binder on the counter. Follow them precisely. She moved toward the private elevator, already pulling her phone from the portfolio to check messages she'd probably read 30 seconds ago. The doors opened at her approach, programmed to recognize her through sensors Marcus couldn't see. She stepped inside, then paused with her hand preventing the doors from closing. "Mr. Kane." He looked up from where he'd knelt to Sophia's eye level. "The security system has been upgraded. There are cameras in every common area." Her voice carried the flat delivery of someone stating facts without emotion. "I will be monitoring them." "Good. You should see what you've been missing." The elevator doors closed on Rebecca's face before she could respond. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked North Indianapolis, Marcus watched the tower's shadow stretch across Meridian Hills like a sundial marking wealthy people's time. Somewhere 52 floors below, Rebecca Sterling was probably already reviewing security feeds on her phone, watching him watch her daughter. Sophia hadn't moved from her position in the hallway. She stood perfectly still, Winston's trunk clutched in both hands, waiting to see what this stranger would do. Now that her mother had left them alone in 3,500 square feet of expensive emptiness. Marcus set Lily's flashcard box on the coffee table, reclaimed barnwood that probably cost more than the original barn. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he raised his hands and signed slowly, giving Sophia time to read each gesture. "Why are you here?" Her fingers tightened on Winston's trunk. A full minute passed in silence, broken only by the HVAC system's whisper and distant traffic noise filtering up from street level. Then her hands moved with the tentative precision of someone testing whether the floor would hold their weight. "Why are you here?" Marcus signed his response with the same careful deliberation he'd use explaining complex joinery to an apprentice. "Because your mom loves you and doesn't know how to show it." Sophia's expression shifted, something passing across her face too quickly to name, but leaving traces like clouds across clear sky. Her hands formed another question. "She doesn't understand me. Then we'll teach her." The little girl studied him for another long moment, conducting whatever evaluation 6-year-olds performed when deciding whether adults could be trusted. Whatever criteria she used, Marcus apparently passed. She crossed the living room with small, deliberate steps and placed her free hand in his. Her palm was warm and impossibly small against his calloused fingers. She led him down the hallway past framed photographs of Rebecca accepting business awards and shaking hands with people Marcus didn't recognize. At the end of the corridor, double doors opened into a playroom that looked like a therapy catalog had exploded. Educational toys still sealed in packaging lined built-in shelves. Therapeutic tools organized in labeled bins occupied a corner near windows overlooking the city. Picture books stacked in precise rows showed no signs of ever having been opened. The entire space communicated good intentions and spectacular failure. Thousands of dollars invested in equipment designed to fix a problem that couldn't be solved with consumer goods. Sophia ignored all of it. She walked to a corner where a low shelf held a single stuffed elephant positioned alone like a monument to isolation. She picked it up and brought it to Marcus with the solemnity of someone transferring sacred relics. Her hands moved in signs he recognized from Lily's vocabulary. "This is Winston. He doesn't talk either. He's my best friend." Marcus accepted the elephant with appropriate reverence, examining Winston's worn fabric and loose stitching. Someone had loved this toy hard enough to damage it. He signed his response to the elephant first, then to Sophia. "Nice to meet you, Winston. I don't talk much myself." Sophia's face transformed, not the ghost of a smile he'd seen yesterday, a full, genuine expression that lit her features like sunrise breaking over flat landscape. She signed rapidly, her small hands forming shapes with increasing confidence. "Can you teach me to talk like you did with your daughter?" The question hit Marcus in the chest with unexpected force. He sat down on the floor because standing suddenly required more structural integrity than his legs possessed. Sophia settled cross-legged in front of him, Winston positioned between them like a mediator. "Yes." I can teach you. What was her name? Marcus's hands paused in midair. He hadn't spoken Lily's name aloud to anyone except Tommy in 2 years. Writing it in ASL felt different, more direct somehow, like signing it made her present in a way verbal speech couldn't achieve. Lily. What happened to her children possessed a particular kind of honesty that bypassed adult social conventions. Sophia asked the question Rebecca had danced around yesterday, delivering it with straightforward curiosity unmarred by pity or discomfort. Her heart stopped working. Like my daddy's car stopped working. Marcus blinked against sudden moisture threatening his vision. This 6-year-old had just connected loss across different mechanisms, understanding that death was death regardless of whether hearts or vehicles failed. Yes, like that. Sophia absorbed this information with visible processing. Her hands stayed still while her mind worked through implications Marcus couldn't track. Finally, she signed again. After my daddy's car stopped working, loud sounds hurt. Does quiet help? Yes, quiet helps. Winston thinks so too. They sat together on the playroom floor while morning sun tracked across imported hardwood and the city continued its oblivious function 52 floors below. Marcus opened Lily's flashcard box, revealing contents he'd sealed 2 years ago. Sophia watched with interest that sharpened to fascination when she saw the painted handprints on the backs. Did Lily make these? Yes. Can I touch them? Permission granted. Sophia examined each card with the careful attention of an archaeologist handling artifacts. Her fingers traced Lily's handprints. 4-year-old palm pressed into tempera paint preserved under laminate that had started to peel at the edges. She looked up at Marcus with a question in her eyes that didn't require signing to communicate. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to photos he kept in a folder marked with Lily's name, the only folder he'd never deleted, despite the pain of opening it. He found one from her 4th birthday, the day he'd carved her the wooden elephant. Lily smiled at the camera with joy that transcended the silence surrounding her. Sophia studied the photo for a long time. Then she set down the flashcard she'd been examining and signed something Marcus hadn't expected. She looks happy. She was. Very happy, even though she couldn't talk, especially because people learned to listen to her hands instead of waiting for her mouth. Sophia processed this with the seriousness of someone receiving information that challenged fundamental assumptions. Her fingers moved slowly, forming signs with deliberation that suggested she was working through concepts bigger than vocabulary. My mom wants me to talk with my mouth. Your mom wants to understand you. She just doesn't know how yet. Can you teach her? The question hung between them like a contract neither had agreed to, but both understood the terms of. Marcus thought about Rebecca Sterling's text from last night, the request to talk after Sophia's bedtime, the pleas that had appeared at the end like surrender. I can try. Sophia nodded once, then picked up Winston and one of Lily's flashcards. She studied the sign for safe, then attempted to replicate it. Her fingers fumbled through the configuration. Marcus corrected her gently, showing her how the hand position changed meaning. She tried again. Better. Her 3rd attempt was nearly perfect. They spent the next 2 hours working through basic signs. Family, home, love, safe, friend, happy, sad, scared. Each word carried weight that went beyond simple vocabulary. Sophia absorbed them with the intensity of someone learning a language that would save her life, which Marcus reflected was probably accurate. She'd been drowning in enforced verbal communication for 18 months. Sign language was the first life preserver anyone had thrown her. Around 11, Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from Tommy. How's it going? He glanced at Sophia, who was teaching Winston the sign for friend with patient repetition. Good. Really good. Tommy's response came quickly. Kelly's hosting cookout Saturday. Bring the kid if boss lady allows it. Emma's dying to meet her. Marcus looked at Sophia again. The little girl who'd been motionless and silent yesterday was now animated. engaged communicating complex thoughts through hands that had been folded in defensive protection 24 hours ago. She needed more than one adult who understood her language. She needed community. "I'll ask." He set the phone down and signed to Sophia. "Do you want to meet other kids who talk with their hands?" Her eyes widened. Her hands formed a question so quickly he almost missed it. "There are other kids like me. Lots of them. And some who talk with their mouths and their hands. When can I meet them Saturday if your mom says yes?" Sophia considered this, then signed with determination that suggested she'd already decided the outcome. "She'll say yes. You'll make her say yes." Marcus wasn't certain he possessed that kind of influence, but Sophia's confidence was compelling. They returned to vocabulary practice, moving through family signs that Lily had learned at 18 months. Mother, father, sister, brother, grandmother, grandfather. Each sign carried implications about relationships and connections and the complex web of humans who either showed up or disappeared. When Sophia signed father, her hands trembled slightly. Marcus caught the hesitation. "Tell me about him." Her fingers moved slowly, carefully forming words weighted with memory. "He was funny. He made voices for Winston. He built me a tree house, but I was too scared to climb it. Then the car stopped working, and he stopped working too." "I'm sorry. Everyone says that. No one knows what it means." The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Marcus had received variations of that phrase constantly after Lily died. "Sorry for your loss, so..." Sorry, thoughts and prayers, our deepest condolences, words that meant nothing because language couldn't contain the shape of grief. "You're right. Sorry doesn't fix anything." Sophia nodded, vindicated in her assessment. Then she signed something that hit Marcus harder than expected. "You understand because Lily stopped working too." "Yes." "Does it stop hurting adults lied to children about grief's trajectory? They offered platitudes about time healing wounds and pain fading, and eventually feeling better. Marcus had heard all of it after Lily died. None of it was true. The pain didn't stop. It just became familiar enough that you could function around it. No, but you learned to carry it. Sophia absorbed this honesty with visible relief. Someone had finally told her the truth instead of offering false comfort. She picked up Winston and held him against her chest. "Winston helps me carry it. That's good. Everyone needs help carrying hard things." They sat together in silence that felt different from the quiet that had filled this playroom before Marcus arrived. This silence had weight and texture and meaning. It was the silence of two people who understood loss and found connection in the shared experience of surviving what shouldn't be survivable. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time the message was from Rebecca. "Is she eating?" He glanced at Sophia. "Are you hungry?" She nodded. They moved to the kitchen, a space that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd seen pictures of kitchens but never actually cooked in one. Stainless steel appliances gleamed unused. Granite countertops bore no signs of meal preparation. The refrigerator contained expensive organic options, arranged with the precision of a museum display. Marcus found ingredients for sandwiches and assembled them, while Sophia watched from a bar stool Winston positioned beside her. She signed questions about his life, where he lived, what he built, whether he liked his job. He answered honestly, describing his Fountain Square apartment, and the furniture he crafted from reclaimed wood, and the satisfaction of transforming raw materials into functional objects. "My mom builds companies. That's impressive. I guess she's always working. Maybe she doesn't know how to stop." Sophia considered this while eating her sandwich turkey and cheese on bread she insisted on cutting into precise triangles. She chewed thoughtfully, then signed around bites. After Daddy died, she worked more. Like work could make him not dead. Marcus had no response adequate to that observation. He'd done something similar after Lily volunteered at Riverside School with intensity that bordered on obsession, throwing himself into teaching woodworking because staying busy meant less time for grief to catch up. Work couldn't resurrect the dead, but it could postpone the reckoning with their absence. They spent the afternoon building a blanket fort, dragging couch cushions, draping throws over furniture, constructing a space that felt separate from the sterile perfection surrounding them. Sophia directed the process like a tiny architect signing instructions, while Marcus executed her vision. Winston supervised from various positions, offering silent commentary through Sophia's interpreting hands. When the fort was complete, they crawled inside with Lily's flashcards. The enclosed space created intimacy that the massive playroom couldn't achieve. Sophia asked about Lily, what she liked, what made her laugh, what she was scared of. Marcus answered each question, finding that talking about his daughter hurt less when he was helping another child learn what Lily had taught him. "She would have liked you." Sophia's face brightened with an expression Marcus recognized from photographs of Lily receiving praise. "Really, really. She liked people who understood that quiet doesn't mean empty. Winston says quiet is full of things people don't listen to. Winston is very wise." They emerged from the fort around 4 when Marcus's back informed him that 36-year-old bodies weren't designed for extended blanket fort occupancy. Sophia immediately began teaching Winston new signs, positioning the elephant where he could see her hands while she repeated vocabulary they'd practiced earlier. Marcus texted Rebecca. "She ate lunch. She's teaching Winston sign language now. Everything's good." The response came within seconds. "I'm watching. Thank you." He glanced at the camera mounted in the corner near the ceiling, a small black dome that probably cost more than most surveillance systems. Rebecca Sterling was somewhere in her tower office 52 floors below, monitoring her daughter's interaction with a carpenter she'd hired 24 hours ago, based on instinct that probably terrified her. At 6:30, Marcus gathered Lily's flashcards and prepared to leave. Sophia's face fell when she realized he was going. Her hands formed the question he'd been expecting. "Will you come back tomorrow? Same time. Promise? Promise." She hugged him, then a quick, fierce embrace that lasted maybe 3 seconds before she pulled back, suddenly self-conscious. Marcus pretended not to notice the moisture in his eyes while he rode the elevator down 52 floors to ground level where his truck waited in visitor parking. Tommy called as he was pulling onto Meridian Street. "How'd day 1 go?" "She's amazing, Tommy. Smart as hell and communicating things her mom doesn't know she's capable of thinking." "So you're hooked." It wasn't a question. Marcus couldn't deny it anyway. "Yeah, I'm hooked. Kelly says bring her Saturday. Emma's been asking about her since I mentioned it this morning. I need to clear it with Rebecca first." "The CEO, you're on first-name basis already. She texted me at 11 asking if Sophia was eating." Tommy whistled low. "That woman's wound tight enough to snap based on what you said. Maybe having you around will remind her she's got a daughter instead of a problem to solve." Marcus thought about Rebecca's text, "I'm watching. Thank you," and wondered what she was seeing through those cameras. A carpenter teaching her daughter sign language, or someone filling space her dead husband should occupy. Or maybe just proof that Sophia could connect with another human being if that human met her in silence instead of demanding speech. His phone buzzed with a new message before he reached Fountain Square. 8:30 tonight. My address attached. We need to talk. Rebecca Sterling. The text carried formality that suggested she'd drafted and deleted several versions before settling on this wording. Marcus pulled into his building's lot and sat in his truck staring at the message. Rebecca Sterling wanted to talk after her daughter's bedtime, which meant this wasn't about schedules or protocols or therapeutic approaches. This was about something else. He texted back, "I'll be there." Then he climbed the stairs to his apartment and tried to figure out what a CEO wanted to discuss with a carpenter at 8:30 on a Wednesday night. The address Rebecca provided led Marcus back to Meridian Hills 45 minutes later. Different building, a converted historic mansion that had been subdivided into luxury condos for people who wanted old money aesthetics with new money amenities. He parked his truck between a Tesla and a Mercedes, feeling acutely aware that his F-150 with construction company logos lowered property values just by existing here. Rebecca answered the door wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft enough to cost several $100s. Her hair hung loose past her shoulders instead of pulled back in executive severity. The transformation from corporate armor to something approaching casual was jarring enough that Marcus needed a moment to confirm he had the right address. "Come in." The condo's interior matched the exterior's historic pretensions, exposed brick, original hardwood crown molding that had witnessed a century of Indianapolis history. But Rebecca had furnished it with the same stark minimalism as her office, creating cognitive dissonance between architectural warmth and decorative coldness. She led him to a living room where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens, lit by landscape lighting that probably ran on timers. She'd set out coffee in expensive cups that looked too delicate for actual use. Neither of them touched it. "I watched the feeds today." Marcus waited. Rebecca paced to the windows, presenting her back while she organized whatever she needed to say. "I saw her laugh. Actually laugh, not that ghost smile from yesterday. I saw her teaching Winston signs. I saw her building a blanket fort with you like she was a normal 6-year-old instead of a broken child who needs fixing." She turned around. Her eyes were bright with moisture she was fighting to control. "I've spent 18 months and over $100,000 on specialists who promised results. Speech therapists with degrees from Yale, child psychologists who came recommended by every expert I consulted, occupational therapists who swore their protocols would produce breakthroughs." Her voice cracked slightly. None of them made her laugh. None of them saw her actually engage instead of just endure. Marcus stayed silent because Rebecca wasn't asking questions yet. She was working towards something she couldn't quite articulate. "You did in one day what they couldn't do in 18 months. And I need to understand why." "They were trying to fix her. I'm just trying to hear her. By teaching her sign language she doesn't need." The challenge in her voice was automatic, defensive reflex of someone whose identity was built on control and measurable outcomes. "She needs it because it's a language that doesn't scare her. Speech is connected to trauma. She was probably talking in the car when the accident happened, maybe talking to her father, asking him questions, telling him about her day. Then the crash and silence, and her father dying while she was trying to process what happened." Rebecca's face went pale. She sat down on the couch like her legs had stopped supporting her weight. "I never thought about that. The doctor said it was traumatic mutism regression to pre-verbal states, anxiety-induced speech refusal, but they never—" She pressed her palms against her eyes. "They never asked what she was doing when it happened." "Were you there?" "No. James was picking her up from preschool. I was in a board meeting approving a merger that seemed critical at the time." Bitterness edged her words. "I got a call from Indiana State Police at 3:15. By the time I reached St. Vincent Hospital, James was gone, and Sophia hadn't said a word to anyone." Marcus gave her space to sit with that memory. After a minute, she lowered her hands and looked at him with eyes that had lost their executive precision. "Teach me." "What?" "Sign language. Teach me how to talk to my daughter." The request landed between them with unexpected weight. Marcus studied her across 6 feet of historic hardwood and immeasurable distance between corporate towers and construction sites. "Why now you could hire an ASL instructor, someone with credentials and teaching certifications." "Because Sophia trusts you, and because I don't want to understand her through translators. I want to—" She faltered, searching for words. "I want to meet her where she is. Like you said." Marcus pulled the folded paper from his jacket pocket, the basic sign list he'd prepared last night, thinking he might need to reference it with Sophia. He'd included fundamental vocabulary. "I love you. I'm sorry. I'm listening. Please. Thank you. Help. Safe. Home." He handed it to Rebecca. She unfolded it with hands that trembled slightly, scanning the diagrams he'd drawn, showing hand positions and movements. This is where you start. This is where everyone starts. The rest comes with practice. She studied the paper with the intensity of someone analyzing quarterly projections. Then she looked up, and Marcus saw something in her expression he recognized from his own mirror 2 years ago. The desperate hope of someone grasping for any method to reach someone they loved but couldn't access. How long until I'm fluent? Lily and I practiced every day for 2 years before it felt natural. But you don't need fluency. You need enough vocabulary to show Sophia you're trying to learn her language instead of forcing her into yours. Rebecca absorbed this, then set down the paper and raised her hands. Show me I love you. Marcus demonstrated the sign, 3 fingers extended, thumb and pinky, forming the shape that had become universal shorthand for the 3 words it represented. Rebecca mimicked his movement, her fingers clumsy and uncertain. She tried again, getting closer. Her 3rd attempt was nearly correct. Like this. Almost. Your middle finger needs to stay straighter. He reached out to adjust her hand position, then hesitated. Physical contact with a woman who'd hired him yesterday crossed professional boundaries he wasn't certain existed in this situation. Rebecca noticed his hesitation and extended her hand toward him. Show me. He corrected her finger placement with the same care he'd use adjusting an apprentice's grip on a chisel. Her hands were soft compared to his calloused fingers, evidence of office work versus manual labor, different kinds of building. She practiced the sign until muscle memory began forming, repeating the motion until it approached fluidity. What else? They worked through the basic list. I'm sorry, fingertips circling on chest. I'm listening, hand cupped behind ear. Please, palm circling on chest. Each sign carried meaning beyond simple vocabulary. They were bridges between isolation and connection, silence and understanding. Rebecca proved a focused student. She practiced each sign until her hands moved with increasing confidence, asking questions about variations and context the way she probably interrogated financial reports. Marcus found himself explaining ASL grammar structure, the importance of facial expressions, the way direction and speed changed meaning. An hour passed before Rebecca checked her watch. I have a 7 a.m. meeting tomorrow. I should, She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew she should dismiss him. Thank him for his time, maintain the professional distance that employment contracts required. Instead, she looked at the basic sign list lying on her coffee table. Then at Marcus. Can you come back? After Sophia's bedtime tomorrow? Teach me more. That's not in my job description. I'll add it to the contract, or pay you separately. Whatever works. Marcus thought about Sophia teaching Winston signs in a playroom full of unopened toys, about Rebecca watching security feeds from her tower office, seeing her daughter engage but unable to understand what she was saying, about the gap between mothers and daughters that could be bridged with hands instead of words. You don't need to pay me extra. This is part of helping Sophia, teaching both of you to talk to each other. Relief crossed Rebecca's face before professional mask reimposed itself. Thank you. Marcus stood to leave. Rebecca walked him to the door, maintaining the careful distance of someone uncertain how to navigate relationships outside corporate hierarchies. As he stepped into the hallway, she spoke again. Mr. Kane, one more thing. He turned back. I'm not staying forever. My job is to teach you both to talk to each other. Then I leave. That's the deal. The words emerged before he'd fully considered their implications. Rebecca's expression shifted, something that might have been disappointment flickering across her face before she recovered. I understand. How long do you think that will take? Depends on how fast you learn and how much Sophia trusts that you won't abandon the language once she teaches it to you. I won't abandon it. Good. Then maybe 3 months, maybe 6, maybe longer. Rebecca nodded slowly, processing timelines the way she probably evaluated project deadlines. That's fair. Marcus left her standing in the doorway of her historic mansion. Kondo practicing I love you with hands that were learning to say things her voice had failed to communicate. He drove back to Fountain Square thinking about temporary arrangements and permanent impacts, about teaching languages and learning to listen, about the ways grief could make you useful if you let it. His phone buzzed as he was parking. Text from Rebecca, sent 3 minutes ago. Thank you for today. And for tonight. I haven't felt hopeful about reaching her in a long time. He stared at the message for a moment before responding. She's worth learning for. I know. I just forgot how to show her. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment, opened the door, and found Tommy sitting on his couch again with 2 beers already opened. You're making a habit of this. Kelly kicked me out, said I was hovering while she graded papers. Tommy handed him a Budweiser. How'd it go with the CEO? She wants me to teach her sign language. Tommy's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. That's either professional dedication or something else. It's a mother trying to talk to her daughter. Sure. Keep telling yourself that. Marcus ignored the implication and drank his beer. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Tommy spoke again. Emma's excited about Saturday. Kelly, too. She thinks it'll be good for Sophia to meet other kids. If Rebecca agrees to let her come. You really think she'd say no? Marcus thought about Rebecca's expression when she'd asked him to teach her, the desperate hope mixing with fear of failure. A woman who'd built a Fortune 500 company but couldn't access her own daughter. Control wouldn't let her say yes easily, but love might. I think she'll say yes because she knows Sophia needs more than what she's been getting. Tommy nodded, satisfied with that assessment. He finished his beer and stood to leave. You're doing good work, man. Lily would be proud. The words hit Marcus in the chest with more force than Tommy probably intended. He'd spent 2 years trying to honor Lily's memory through volunteer work and careful preservation of her belongings, and refusing to move forward because moving forward felt like leaving her behind. But maybe Tommy was right. Maybe teaching another little girl the language Lily had taught him was exactly what honoring her memory looked like. After Tommy left, Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to the folder of Lily's photos. He found one from her 3rd birthday, her hands forming the sign for happy, while chocolate cake covered her face. She'd been so alive in that moment, so present and engaged despite the silence surrounding her. He set the photo as his lock screen for the first time since her death. Then he went to bed thinking about Sophia's question from earlier. Does it stop hurting? The answer was still no, but carrying the pain felt lighter when it served a purpose beyond survival. Thursday morning arrived with October cold that made Marcus's truck reluctant to start. He arrived at Rebecca's penthouse at 7:40, carrying coffee from a Fountain Square shop that served it black and strong instead of transformed into dessert beverages. Sophia was already awake, dressed in clothes she'd obviously chosen herself. Mismatched patterns that communicated independence. She signed "Good morning" with hands that moved more confidently than yesterday. They spent the morning expanding vocabulary beyond basics, moving into emotional concepts. Happy, sad, angry, scared, confused. Each sign came with conversations about when you felt these things and why naming emotions mattered. Around noon, Marcus asked about Saturday. Sophia's face lit up with an expression that needed no translation. Can I really meet other kids who sign if your mom says yes? Will you ask her? I'll try. He texted Rebecca during Sophia's lunch. Tommy's wife is hosting a cookout Saturday. Their daughter Emma is 7, learning ASL at her public school. Other kids will be there. Thought Sophia might benefit from meeting peers who understand her language. The response took 10 minutes, long enough that Marcus wondered if he'd overstepped. Then, is it safe? Will you be there the whole time? Yes to both. Tommy's family is good people. His wife Kelly is an elementary school teacher. Very family-friendly environment. Another pause. Then Sophia would want to go. She lit up when I mentioned other kids who sign. 5 more minutes passed. Marcus watched the typing indicator appear and disappear multiple times before the final message arrived. Okay. What time and where he forwarded Tommy's address in Beech Grove and confirmed 2 p.m. Saturday. Then he showed Sophia the text exchange. Her response was immediate, jumping up from her lunch and hugging him hard enough to knock Winston off the counter. The rest of Thursday and Friday passed in intensive vocabulary building. Sophia proved a remarkable student, absorbing signs with the hunger of someone who'd been starving for this particular kind of nourishment. She asked about everything: how to sign playground and ice cream, and scared of thunder, and missing daddy. Each question opened conversations that Marcus answered as honestly as he could, never offering false comfort, but always providing truth. Friday evening, Rebecca texted asking for another lesson after Sophia's bedtime. They worked through intermediate signs, moving beyond basics into conversational phrases. Rebecca's hands grew steadier with practice muscle memory, forming neural pathways that would eventually make signing as natural as speech. She asked questions about Sophia's progress, about what they'd discussed, about whether Marcus thought the child was improving. She's not improving. She's becoming herself in a language that doesn't scare her. Rebecca processed this distinction while practicing the sign for understand. I've been trying to make her go back to who she was before James died. That's what the therapist said restore baseline functionality. Maybe she can't go back. Maybe she's growing forward into someone different, and that's okay. The concept appeared to challenge Rebecca's fundamental assumptions about problem solving. She set down the vocabulary list and looked at Marcus with an expression caught between frustration and revelation. I don't know how to do this. How to accept that my daughter is permanently changed. You're already doing it. You're learning her language. That's acceptance. Saturday arrived with Indian summer warmth that made October feel confused about its seasonal assignment. Marcus picked up Sophia at 1:30, loading her and Winston into his truck, while Rebecca provided instructions that bordered on surveillance protocols. She'd clearly spent the previous 12 hours imagining every possible disaster that could befall her daughter in Beech Grove. Tommy and Kelly Sullivan. Address confirmed. Your phone is charged. You'll text me when you arrive and every hour after. If she's uncomfortable at any point, I'll bring her home immediately. Rebecca looked at Sophia, buckled into the passenger seat, then at Marcus. She's never done this before. Social situations with strangers. She'll be fine. Emma's excited to meet her. They drove to Beech Grove with Sophia signing questions about what to expect. Marcus answered each one, explaining cookouts and backyards and the particular social dynamics of suburban family gatherings. Sophia absorbed this information while watching Indianapolis scroll past the windows, neighborhoods transitioning from Meridian Hills wealth to working-class stability. Tommy's house occupied a corner lot in a subdivision built during the 90s, housing boom vinyl siding and 2-car garage, and a yard where grass grew thick enough to suggest someone actually lived here instead of treating home as investment property. Kids' toys scattered across the front lawn communicated family chaos that Rebecca's penthouse sterility couldn't imagine. Kelly Sullivan answered the door with a smile that suggested she specialized in making people feel welcome. She was built like someone who'd played college softball and never entirely stopped being athletic, with red hair pulled back in a ponytail and freckles that mapped Irish ancestry. She signed hello to Sophia with hands that moved carefully but correctly. I'm Kelly, Emma's mom. She's been so excited to meet you. Sophia's eyes widened. An adult who signed without being prompted. Kelly caught her reaction and laughed. I'm still learning. Emma's teaching me. She switched to verbal speech directed at Marcus. She's been practicing all week. Come on back, everyone's in the yard. The backyard contained exactly what Marcus had promised, a grill smoking with burgers, kids running through sprinklers despite October temperatures, adults clustered in conversation groups with beer bottles sweating condensation. Tommy worked the grill with the focused attention of someone who took meat preparation seriously. He looked up when they entered, waving a spatula in greeting. Emma Sullivan materialized from somewhere, moving with the boundless energy of 7-year-olds who hadn't learned to moderate enthusiasm. She stopped in front of Sophia and signed a greeting. Marcus recognized from elementary ASL textbooks. "Hi, I'm Emma. Want to play?" Sophia looked at Marcus for confirmation. He nodded. Emma grabbed Sophia's hand and Winston's trunk, pulling both toward where other kids were engaged in some game involving a soccer ball and rules that probably made sense to participants. Sophia went willingly, glancing back once to make sure Marcus was staying. Kelly appeared at his elbow with a beer. "She's beautiful. Tommy said she hasn't spoken since her father died. 2 years of silence. But she's got a lot to say if you listen with your eyes instead of your ears." Emma's been learning ASL at School 43. They have a great integrated program, deaf and hearing kids in the same classroom with both spoken English and ASL instruction. She comes home teaching us new signs every day. Kelly paused. "There's a spot open in that class if Sophia's interested. I could talk to the principal." Marcus watched Sophia across the yard. Emma was demonstrating signs while other kids watched with curious interest. Sophia responded, her hands moving through vocabulary Marcus had taught her, and Emma's face lit up with recognition and excitement. 2 girls connecting across language barriers that didn't matter when hands could speak. "I'll mention it to her mother." "How's that going?" Tommy says the CEO lady is pretty intense. "She's learning. It's hard for her accepting that her daughter changed and won't change back." Kelly nodded, understanding. "Some parents want their kids to fit predetermined molds. The good ones learn to love the shape their kids actually are." She gestured toward Emma and Sophia, who were now teaching other children basic signs. "That right there, that's what Sophia needs. Community. Other kids who think communicating with hands is normal instead of weird." Marcus pulled out his phone and texted Rebecca. "She's good. Making friends. We'll send photos." He took several pictures of Sophia and Emma signing to each other, both girls laughing at something that needed no verbal explanation. He sent them to Rebecca, watching the typing indicator appear immediately. "She looks happy." "She is. I've never seen her like that with other children. She's never had other children who spoke her language." The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before Rebecca's response came through. "Thank you for this." Marcus pocketed his phone and accepted a burger from Tommy, who'd abandoned the grill to join him near the fence line where they could observe without hovering. "Kid's a natural. Look at her go." Sophia was teaching a group of 5 children the sign for friend, demonstrating hand positions, while Emma interpreted verbally for kids who hadn't learned ASL yet. The other children mimicked her movements with varying degrees of accuracy, but their enthusiasm was universal. For the first time in 2 years, Sophia Sterling existed in a peer group that valued what she could do instead of focusing on what she couldn't. Kelly mentioned School 43 has an opening in Emma's integrated class. Tommy took a long pull from his Budweiser. "Yeah. Good program. Expensive neighborhood, though you pretty much have to live in the district or pay out-of-district tuition. But I bet Sterling Technologies money could handle that." Marcus thought about Rebecca's penthouse in Meridian Hills, the private education consultants, the 18 months of failed therapy. Maybe what Sophia needed wasn't more expensive intervention, but different intervention. A classroom where sign language was normal and silence was just another way of communicating. The afternoon stretched into evening. Kids cycled through games and food and minor disputes that adults mediated without drama. Sophia stayed close to Emma but gradually expanded her interactions to other children, signing conversations that Marcus caught in fragments. She looked more alive than he'd seen her all week, engaged, present, actually being a 6-year-old instead of a problem requiring solutions. Around 5, Marcus texted Rebecca, heading back soon. She's had a great time. Can I see her tonight after you drop her off? She'll be tired. I know, but I've been practicing signs all day and I want to show her. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Rebecca Sterling spending her Saturday practicing ASL instead of working. That was progress measured in gestures rather than quarterly earnings. I'll bring her up when we get there. They left Beech Grove as autumn darkness settled over Indianapolis. Sophia signed continuously during the drive, telling him about Emma and the other kids in the soccer game where they invented new signs for goal and penalty kick. Her hands moved with confidence he'd never have predicted 4 days ago. This was a child finding herself in community after 2 years of isolation. At the Meridian Hills penthouse, Rebecca was waiting. She'd changed from whatever she'd been wearing earlier into casual clothes that suggested she'd spent the day home instead of working jeans and a sweatshirt from Indiana University that looked soft from repeated washing. She knelt when Sophia entered, bringing herself to eye level. Then she signed. "Did you have fun?" Sophia's face transformed. Her mother who'd spent 18 months dragging her to specialists and demanding speech, was using her hands instead of her voice. She signed back rapidly, explaining the cookout and Emma and the soccer game with enthusiasm that bubbled over into physical bouncing. Rebecca followed most of it, asking clarifying questions when she lost the thread. Marcus provided interpretation where needed, watching mother and daughter communicate in a language Rebecca had learned in less than a week because Sophia needed it. When Sophia ran out of conversational energy, Rebecca signed something Marcus had taught her Friday night. "I'm proud of you. I love you." Sophia stared at her mother's hands, processing what she'd just witnessed. Then she signed back slowly, carefully, making sure Rebecca understood every gesture. "I love you too. Are you really learning my language?" "Yes, because I want to understand you. Really, 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 really." Sophia launched herself at Rebecca, hugging her with force that nearly knocked them both over. Rebecca caught her holding tight, and over Sophia's shoulder, Marcus saw tears tracking down the CEO's face. Not the controlled emotion of someone maintaining professional composure, just raw, unfiltered relief that she'd finally reached her daughter through silence instead of demanding sound. Marcus stepped back toward the elevator, giving them space. Rebecca looked up, still holding Sophia. "Thank you," she mouthed. He nodded and left them there, mother and daughter finally speaking the same language after 2 years of miscommunication. The elevator descended 52 floors while Marcus thought about temporary arrangements and permanent impacts about languages learned from grief and communities built from understanding. His phone buzzed before he reached the parking garage. Text from Tommy Kelly talked to School 43 principal. "They'd love to have Sophia. Can do intake Monday if Mom agrees." Marcus forwarded the message to Rebecca with a note. "This is what she needs. Community. Education that includes her language instead of trying to eliminate it." The response came as he was starting his truck. "Set it up. Whatever it costs." Monday morning, Marcus arrived to find Rebecca's penthouse transformed into ASL study center. Flashcards covered the refrigerator. Vocabulary lists papered the bathroom mirror. Sticky notes labeled every object with both English words and drawn hand configurations. Rebecca had spent her Sunday building infrastructure for language acquisition with the same intensity she'd probably applied to building Sterling Technologies. Sophia noticed immediately, her face cycling through surprise and delight and something deeper recognition that her mother was serious about learning instead of just pacifying. They spent Monday morning preparing for School 43 intake. Marcus taught Sophia signs for classroom vocabulary, teacher, student desk book, pencil, bathroom recess. Rebecca joined them during her lunch break, practicing alongside her daughter, stumbling through hand positions while Sophia corrected her with patient authority that reversed their usual dynamic. The intake appointment was scheduled for 3 p.m. Rebecca left work early, apparently shocking her entire executive team, and met them at School 43 in Broad Ripple. The building was older Indianapolis construction brick and wood that predated modern architectural trends, surrounded by playground equipment worn smooth by generations of children. Principal Sarah Martinez greeted them in a lobby decorated with student artwork and multilingual welcome signs. She was maybe 50 Latina, with the particular warmth of educators who'd survived decades of public school administration without becoming cynical. "You must be Sophia," she signed while speaking, hands moving fluently. "I'm Principal Martinez. Emma Sullivan is so excited that you're joining her class." Sophia signed a response that Marcus caught. "Really, really. She hasn't stopped talking about you since Saturday." They toured the integrated classroom, 20 students, half deaf and half hearing, 2 teachers working in tandem with both spoken English and ASL. Kids moved fluidly between communication modes, some signing, some speaking, some doing both simultaneously. The environment normalized Sophia's silence instead of pathologizing it. Emma spotted them through the classroom windows and waved enthusiastically. Sophia waved back, signing "friend" to Marcus with an expression that needed no interpretation. Rebecca watched the classroom with visible emotion she was fighting to contain. Principal Martinez noticed. "It's different from what you expected. I spent 18 months trying to make her speak. I never considered that maybe she didn't need to." Some children process trauma by retreating into themselves. For Sophia, silence became safety. This classroom doesn't require her to abandon that safety, it just gives her more tools to communicate from within it. The enrollment paperwork took 20 minutes. Rebecca signed forms authorizing everything from field trips to emergency medical care, her hand moving across documents with practiced efficiency. When she reached the section about special accommodations, she paused. She doesn't need accommodations. She needs acceptance. Principal Martinez smiled. Then that's what we'll provide. Sophia started Tuesday. Marcus picked her up at 7:30, drove her to School 43, and watched her walk into the building, holding Emma's hand like they'd been friends for years instead of days. Rebecca was in meetings but texted throughout the morning. "Is she okay? Has the teacher reported anything?" "Should I call Marcus?" responded with patience he hadn't known he possessed. "She's fine. Learning. Let her have this without monitoring." Around 11, his phone rang. Not a text, an actual call from Rebecca Sterling. "There's a board meeting Thursday. Thomas Whitmore is raising concerns about our arrangement." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that suggest unmarried men shouldn't have unsupervised access to children. The kind that question my judgment in hiring someone without proper credentials. The kind that threaten to become liability issues if I don't address them appropriately." Marcus felt cold settle into his chest despite October warmth streaming through his truck windows. "What are you going to do?" "Exactly what I should have done 18 months ago. Tell them my daughter's well-being matters more than their comfort with my parenting decisions." Her voice carried steel underneath uncertainty. "But I wanted you to know it's coming. Thomas has influence. He was my father's business partner. Some board members listen to him more than they listen to me. Do I need to do anything? Just keep being what Sophia needs. I'll handle the board." They hung up with the conversation feeling incomplete, too many variables unaccounted for, too many ways this could collapse. Marcus drove to School 43 at 2:30, arriving early to watch dismissal through the fence line. Sophia emerged with Emma, both girls signing rapidly while other students called farewells in both English and ASL. She looked like she belonged, like she'd found her people in a classroom that understood her language. That night, Rebecca came to Marcus's apartment instead of summoning him to Meridian Hills, a reversal that surprised him when she texted asking for his address. She arrived at 8, carrying a tablet loaded with vocabulary apps and a desperation that suggested she'd spent the afternoon preparing for warfare. "Teach me more. Everything you know. I need to be fluent enough that no one can question my understanding of my daughter's needs." They worked until midnight, Marcus pushing her through increasingly complex signs and grammatical structures. Rebecca absorbed it with the intensity of someone cramming for an exam, where failure meant losing everything. Her hands grew surer faster, more expressive. She was learning not just vocabulary, but the rhythms of visual language, the way direction and speed and facial expression modified meaning. "How's Sophia at school?" "Happy." Actually happy. She came home Tuesday and signed for an hour straight about everything she learned. I understood maybe 60%. Rebecca's hands moved through the sign for understand with increasing confidence. But that 60% was more than I'd gotten in 18 months of forced speech therapy. Wednesday passed in tense anticipation of Thursday's board meeting. Rebecca texted Marcus updates throughout the day, Thomas gathering support, other board members expressing concerns, Dr. Morrison preparing professional testimony about attachment disorders and appropriate therapeutic boundaries. "They're building a case to terminate your employment. Let them try. Sophia needs this. I know, but they have power I'm not sure I can override." Thursday morning, Marcus drove Sophia to school, watching her disappear into a building where she belonged, then sat in his truck trying to figure out what came next if Rebecca's board forced his termination. He'd survived Lily's death. He'd rebuilt some semblance of functional existence. He'd found purpose in teaching another little girl the language his daughter had taught him. Losing that would hurt in ways he hadn't expected when he'd signed Rebecca's 17-page contract 6 days ago. His phone rang at 10 a.m., Rebecca's name on the screen. "They voted 6-4 that you need supervised visits only or immediate termination. I vetoed as CEO, but Thomas is putting it in the minutes for next month's shareholder meeting. He's claiming I'm letting maternal guilt cloud my judgment." Marcus heard the strain in her voice, exhaustion and anger and fear mixing into something close to breaking. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. Keep doing exactly what you're doing with Sophia. I'll handle the board." She hung up before he could respond. Marcus sat in his truck outside School 43 and wondered what Rebecca Sterling planned to do against board members who'd known her since childhood, who'd worked with her father, who'd watched her build Sterling Technologies, and probably assumed they could control her through institutional pressure. He picked up Sophia at 2:30. She signed questions about why he looked worried. He deflected, redirecting to her day at school. She accepted the evasion but kept watching him with the particular awareness children develop when adults try to hide problems. That evening, Rebecca texted, "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., private meeting. Just us. I need to tell you something." The message carried weight Marcus couldn't decode. He responded with confirmation and spent the rest of Thursday evening trying to figure out what a CEO needed to say to a carpenter in a private meeting after her board had moved to terminate his employment. Friday morning, he dropped Sophia at School 43 as usual. She hugged him before running to join Emma, a gesture she'd started doing this week that hit him in the chest every time. He watched her disappear into the building, then drove to Sullivan Construction, where Tommy had lined up drywall work that required focus he couldn't quite maintain. "You're distracted." Tommy's observation came around noon while they were loading tools. Marcus hadn't mentioned the board situation, but Tommy could read people the way good carpenters read wood grain. "Rebecca's board is trying to force her to fire me. Liability concerns. Thomas Whitmore thinks unmarried men shouldn't have unsupervised access to children." Tommy's jaw tightened. "That's horseshit. It's corporate politics. They have power. She's fighting it, but I don't know if she can win." What happens to Sophia if they succeed? The question Marcus had been avoiding landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Sophia had spent 1 week in an environment where her silence was normal, where she had friends who signed, where she could be herself without pressure to speak. Terminating Marcus meant sending her back to isolation and speech therapists who'd failed for 18 months. Nothing good. They finished the drywall job in silence, heavy with implications neither man wanted to articulate. Marcus picked up Sophia at 2:30, drove her home, spent the afternoon teaching her new vocabulary while trying not to think about what happened if this was their last week together. Rebecca texted at 6. Still on for 8. Yes. My place, not the penthouse, the other address. Marcus showed up at 8 p.m. with coffee he'd stopped for because showing up empty-handed felt wrong. Rebecca answered wearing the same IU sweatshirt from Saturday, hair pulled back in a ponytail, face scrubbed free of the makeup that usually armored her features. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. She led him to the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens lit by landscape lighting. But instead of sitting, she stayed standing, arms crossed, building towards something she was struggling to say. I'm resigning. The words hit Marcus like a truck running a red light. What? Not completely. Stepping down from CEO to board advisory role. 3 days a week instead of 7. Linda Chen is taking over as acting CEO. She's been COO for 6 years and she's ready. The board approved it this afternoon. Rebecca's voice stayed steady despite delivering information that clearly terrified her. Thomas pushed for your termination. I gave them my resignation as CEO instead. Told them if they wanted to protect the company from my supposedly compromised judgment, they could remove me from daily operations. Marcus stared at her. You quit your job because your board wanted to fire me. I stepped back from a position that was preventing me from being the mother my daughter needs. There's a difference. Rebecca, I've spent 2 years building quarterly projections while my daughter retreated into silence. I've prioritized shareholder value over learning sign language. I've let a company my father started dictate how I parent. She took a breath that shook slightly. Thomas was right about one thing: my judgment was compromised, but not the way he thought. My judgment was compromised by thinking my daughter needed to fit the world instead of finding a world that fit her. Marcus didn't know what to say. This woman had just restructured her entire professional life rather than let her board force decisions about her daughter's care. What about Sterling Technologies? It'll survive without me running daily operations. Turns out companies are remarkably resilient when you promote competent people. Her mouth twisted into something between smile and grimace. Linda's already implementing changes I was too afraid to try. Flexible work policies, better parental leave, actual work-life balance. Maybe stepping back was overdue. She finally sat down, gesturing for Marcus to join her. I called you here because I wanted you to know before it becomes public Monday, and because I wanted to say thank you, not as your employer, but as Sophia's mother. You gave me my daughter back. That's worth more than any job title. Marcus absorbed this information while autumn wind rattled windows overlooking gardens where landscape lighting cast shadows that moved like living things. You didn't have to quit for me. I didn't quit for you. I stepped back for Sophia. You were just the person who showed me that was possible. They sat in silence that felt different from the quiet that had filled this room. Before less tense, somehow more settled, Rebecca reached for the coffee he'd brought, taking a sip before making a face. This is terrible coffee. It's Fountain Square coffee. We don't have time for foam art. She laughed, actual laughter that sounded rusty from disuse but genuine. For just a moment, she looked like someone who might remember how to be happy instead of just successful. Show me more signs. I want to practice. They worked through advanced vocabulary until midnight, Marcus pushing her through grammatical structures that required thinking in spatial dimensions instead of linear progression. Rebecca struggled with some concepts but attacked them with determination that suggested she'd apply the same intensity to learning ASL that she'd previously applied to quarterly projections. Around 11:30, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then turned the screen toward Marcus. Text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. Thomas Rebecca deleted it without responding. He's not happy. He's never happy. That's his natural state. She set the phone down. But he doesn't control my life anymore. The board accepted my resignation. Linda takes over Monday. Thomas can complain to shareholders if he wants, but the transition is done. Marcus thought about corporate politics and power dynamics and the particular courage required to walk away from positions you'd spent 15 years building. Are you scared? Rebecca's hands paused mid-sign. She looked at him with eyes that had lost their executive precision. Terrified. I've been CEO since I was 27. I don't know who I am without that title. Her voice dropped to near whisper. But I know who Sophia is now, and that matters more than my identity crisis. They finished the lesson around 12:30. Marcus gathered his things while Rebecca walked him to the door, moving with exhaustion that suggested she'd been running on adrenaline for days. Same time tomorrow, Sophia will want to show you what she learned this week at school. I'll be there. She hesitated at the door hand on the frame, something unspoken hanging between them. Marcus, when you said this arrangement was temporary, that you'd leave once Sophia and I could communicate, did you mean that? The question caught him off guard. He'd thrown that boundary up as protection against getting too attached, against letting another child into the space Lily still occupied. But Sophia had bypassed his defenses with the same efficiency she'd bypassed 18 months of speech therapy. I meant it when I said it. I'm less sure now. Rebecca nodded slowly, processing this admission. Good. Because I think we're going to need you longer than 3 months. She closed the door before he could respond. Marcus drove back to Fountain Square, thinking about temporary arrangements that were becoming permanent, about jobs that transformed into something deeper than employment contracts could define, about the ways helping other people heal started healing yourself. His phone buzzed as he was parking. Text from Rebecca. Thank you for tonight, and for everything. Sleep well. He stared at the message longer than necessary before responding, You too. See you tomorrow. Inside his apartment, Tommy's inevitable beer waited on the counter with a note. Kelly says you're doing good work. Keep it up. Marcus opened the beer and stood at his window, overlooking Fountain Square, watching October wind move through trees that were starting to turn autumn colors. Somewhere across Indianapolis, Rebecca Sterling was probably lying awake, processing the fact that she'd just resigned from running a Fortune 500 company. Somewhere in Meridian Hills, Sophia was sleeping in a penthouse that felt less sterile now that ASL vocabulary covered every surface. And here in Fountain Square, Marcus Kane stood drinking cheap beer and thinking about Lily's flashcards and Sophia's laughter and the strange mathematics of grief that somehow made helping others hurt less than helping yourself. His phone buzzed again. Text from unknown number. This isn't over. Your background will be scrutinized. Your history will be examined. We'll find something. TW. Thomas Whitmore had apparently decided direct threats were more efficient than corporate maneuvering. Marcus stared at the message, feeling cold settle into his chest. His employment gap was explainable. His volunteer work was documented. His references were solid. But there were ways to make innocent history look suspicious if you wanted badly enough to destroy someone. He forwarded the message to Rebecca without comment. Her response came within seconds. Forward all communication from Thomas to me. Document everything. This is harassment, and it's about to become very expensive for him. Marcus set down his phone and finished his beer while watching Fountain Square settle into Friday night rhythms, people heading to bars, couples, walking dogs, ordinary life continuing its oblivious function. He'd thought accepting Rebecca's job offer was a simple transaction. Teach a kid sign language, help a mother reconnect with her daughter, collect a paycheck, and move on. He hadn't anticipated board politics or resignation announcements or text messages threatening to scrutinize his grief-shaped employment history. He definitely hadn't anticipated caring this much about whether Sophia Sterling could keep attending a school where her silence was normal and her mother could learn to speak her language. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the photo folder containing Lily's pictures. He found the one from her 4th birthday chocolate cake and the sign for happy, and stared at it for a long minute. "I'm trying to honor your memory the right way, Lily. I hope this is what you'd want." His daughter smiled at him from the screen, frozen in a moment of joy that transcended silence. Marcus went to bed thinking about temporary arrangements and permanent impacts about languages learned from grief and communities built from understanding about the particular courage it took to protect something fragile when powerful people wanted to crush it. Tomorrow he'd pick up Sophia and take her to school where she belonged. Tomorrow he'd continue teaching her and Rebecca the language Lily had taught him. Tomorrow he'd face whatever Thomas Whitmore planned to throw at him with the same stubborn determination that had kept him functional after his daughter died. But tonight, alone in his Fountain Square apartment with October wind rattling windows, Marcus Kane let himself imagine a future where Sophia thrived and Rebecca healed, and maybe, just maybe, he figured out how to live instead of just surviving. Outside his window, Indianapolis continued its uneven march through autumn. Inside his chest, something that had been frozen for 2 years continued its tentative thaw. The grief remained. It would always remain. But maybe Tommy was right about grief making you useful instead of useless. Maybe helping Sophia find her voice was exactly what honoring Lily's memory looked like. Maybe there was more than one way to keep loving someone after they were gone. His phone buzzed one final time. Text from Rebecca. "I meant what I said earlier. We need you. Both of us. Please don't let Thomas scare you away." Marcus typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on truth. "I'm not going anywhere." He sent it and turned off his phone, climbing into bed while Fountain Square settled into night sounds and distant sirens and the particular quiet of cities that never completely sleep. Tomorrow would bring whatever Thomas Whitmore planned. Tomorrow would test whether Rebecca's resignation gave her enough freedom to protect the arrangement they'd built. Tomorrow would determine if 1 week of progress could survive institutional pressure to destroy it. But tonight, Marcus Kane fell asleep thinking about small hands forming big meanings about mothers learning daughters' languages, about grief transformed into purpose instead of paralysis. And for the first time in 2 years, he dreamed of Lily smiling instead of dying. Progress measured in silence. Hope carried in gestures. Family built from understanding instead of blood. Outside his window, October wind whispered through Indianapolis neighborhoods where wealth and poverty existed in uncomfortable proximity. Inside his chest, Marcus's heart beat steady rhythms that suggested maybe possibly he was learning to live again. The story wasn't finished. The threats weren't neutralized. The future remained uncertain. But for one Friday night in Fountain Square, that was enough. Thomas Whitmore's anonymous complaint arrived via registered mail on Monday morning, while Marcus was driving Sophia to School 43. The envelope bore a law firm's return address, Blackwell & Associates, downtown Indianapolis, the kind of attorneys who charged hourly rates that could finance small cars. Inside, formal allegations of inappropriate conduct with a minor, vague enough to avoid defamation charges, but specific enough to trigger mandatory investigation protocols. Rebecca called at 8:15, voice tight with controlled fury. "HR received the same document. Company policy requires immediate suspension pending full investigation. I can't override it without exposing Sterling Technologies to liability claims." A pause. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This is Thomas weaponizing bureaucracy." Marcus pulled into the School 43 parking lot, watching Sophia and Emma disappear into a building where his presence was about to become illegal, pending investigation outcomes. How long? 72 hours minimum for preliminary review. Longer if they find anything requiring deeper examination. They won't find anything. I know. But Thomas doesn't need truth. He needs delay. Rebecca's breath came sharp through the phone. 3 days without you means 3 days of Sophia asking where you went. 3 days of her thinking another person abandoned her. Marcus thought about a 6-year-old who'd watched her father die and then spent 2 years learning that silence protected better than speech. 3 days might undo a week of progress built on trust that adults showed up when they promised. Can you explain it to her? In signs. I'll try. But Marcus, Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. She's going to think you left. The call ended with nothing resolved and everything at stake. Marcus drove to Sullivan Construction, where Tommy took one look at his face and sent the crew home early. Anonymous complaint. Thomas Whitmore hired lawyers, formal allegations, mandatory suspension while HR investigates. Tommy's jaw tightened hard enough that Marcus heard teeth grinding. What do you need? Character witnesses. Documentation of my volunteer work at Riverside. Anything that shows I'm not the predator Thomas is implying. I'll call everyone, Kelly too. Half of Beech Grove will testify for you if needed. But testimony took time, and investigations followed protocols designed to protect institutions rather than individuals. Marcus spent Monday afternoon providing statements to Sterling Technologies' HR representatives, who documented his words with the detached efficiency of people processing problems rather than people. They asked about his employment gap, his relationship with Sophia, his motivations for teaching sign language. Every question carried subtle implications that innocence required proof rather than assumption. Tuesday brought media attention. Someone, almost certainly Thomas, had leaked the investigation to business reporters who smelled scandal involving a Fortune 500 CEO and her recently resigned position. The Indianapolis Business Journal ran a story with the headline, "Sterling Technologies Under Scrutiny, Former CEO's Childcare Decisions Raise Questions." The article quoted anonymous board members expressing concern about Rebecca's judgment and the company's liability exposure. Marcus's phone exploded with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters asking for statements, lawyers offering representation. People he'd worked with years ago suddenly remembering him and wanting details they could sell to media outlets hungry for corporate scandal content. He ignored all of it and texted Rebecca, "How's Sophia?" The response took 10 minutes. "Asking for you constantly. I keep signing that you'll be back, but she doesn't believe me. Can you send her a video message?" Marcus recorded himself signing directly to Sophia, explaining that he had to be away for a few days, but he was coming back, that sometimes adults had to deal with complicated things, but it didn't mean he was leaving her. He sent it to Rebecca and hoped it would be enough. Wednesday, the investigation report came back preliminary findings. No evidence of inappropriate conduct. All interactions documented via security footage showed appropriate boundaries, character references, uniformly, positive employment gap, explained satisfactorily by family medical situation. The HR representative who delivered results sounded almost disappointed that they hadn't found ammunition for Thomas's allegations. But the damage was done. 3 days of absence had convinced Sophia that Marcus had abandoned her the way her father's death had abandoned her. Rebecca reported via text that the little girl had stopped signing, stopped engaging with Emma at school, retreated back into the defensive silence that had defined her before Marcus arrived. "She won't believe me that you're coming back. I've shown her the video 20 times. She just turns away." Marcus stared at that message and felt rage build in his chest with enough pressure to crack ribs. Thomas Whitmore had weaponized a traumatized child's abandonment issues to score political points against Rebecca. He'd sacrificed a 6-year-old's healing to punish her mother for defying board authority. Thursday morning. Marcus drove to Sterling Technologies' downtown headquarters without invitation or appointment. The security guard in the lobby tried to stop him. "Sir, you need to sign in, sir. You can't just go up there." But Marcus had spent 4 years working construction in buildings identical to this one, and he knew which stairwells bypassed security checkpoints. He took the stairs to 52, emerging into the executive floor, where Grace Chen looked up from her desk with an expression that cycled through surprise and concern before settling on determination. "She's in a meeting with the board. They're deciding whether to pursue formal termination proceedings against you despite the investigation clearing you." "I need 5 minutes with Thomas Whitmore." Grace's eyebrows climbed. "That's a terrible idea." "Probably. Where is he?" She studied Marcus for a long moment, then made a decision that would likely cost her job. "Conference room B. Third door on the left. I didn't see you come up here." Thomas Whitmore sat alone in a glass-walled conference room, reviewing documents, with the satisfied expression of someone winning a game he'd rigged. He looked up when Marcus entered, without knocking, his face cycling through surprise and disdain. "You're not supposed to be in this building." Marcus closed the door behind him and stayed standing, because sitting would require more self-control than he currently possessed. "You weaponized a traumatized child to hurt Rebecca. You filed false allegations knowing they'd be disproven, but calculating that the investigation process would do enough damage to serve your purposes." Thomas set down his documents with deliberate care. "I have concerns about proper child care protocols and liability exposure. Those concerns are legitimate, regardless of investigation outcomes. Your concerns are about control. Rebecca defied you by resigning instead of firing me. So you manufactured a scandal to punish her through her daughter." Something shifted in Thomas's expression, a flicker of anger breaking through patrician composure. "Rebecca's judgment has been compromised since James died. She's let maternal guilt override her fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. Someone needs to protect Sterling Technologies from her emotional decisions." Sterling Technologies is thriving under Linda Chen. Revenue projections are up. Employee satisfaction metrics improved. The company doesn't need protection from Rebecca. It needed protection from board members who confused control with leadership. Thomas stood, drawing himself up to full height despite being 3 inches shorter than Marcus. "You're a carpenter with delusions of relevance. You have no credentials, no expertise, no standing to judge my decisions. You're exactly the kind of liability I warned Rebecca about: unqualified individuals gaining inappropriate influence over vulnerable situations." Marcus felt something cold and precise settle into his chest. The rage burned away, leaving behind clarity sharp enough to cut. "You're right. I'm a carpenter. I build things. And I built something with Sophia that you're trying to destroy because it threatens your authority." He leaned forward slightly. "But here's what you didn't calculate, Thomas. Rebecca doesn't need Sterling Technologies anymore. She has resources and connections independent of this company. And she has documentation of every communication you've sent, including the text messages threatening to scrutinize my background and the anonymous tip you sent to media outlets about the investigation." Thomas's face went pale. "You can't prove." "Grace Chen can. She's been documenting your communications for 6 months because she knew eventually you'd overstep. And harassment of a former CEO using company resources constitutes grounds for removal under Sterling Technologies bylaws. Which I know because Rebecca emailed me the relevant sections last night." Marcus straightened and moved toward the door. Before leaving, he delivered the line he'd been constructing since Tuesday. "You forgot that people who build things understand foundations, and you just discovered yours are rotten." He left Thomas frozen in his conference room and took the stairs back down to ground level where his truck waited in visitor parking. His phone buzzed before he reached Fountain Square. "Text from Rebecca Grace said you were here. What did you do?" Showed Thomas his cards. "He's bluffing with nothing." "Marcus. He's dangerous when cornered." "Good. So am I." Friday morning, Rebecca called him at 6 a.m. The board is holding an emergency vote this afternoon. Thomas is pushing for your permanent termination and a formal public statement disavowing my childcare decisions. He's framing it as protecting the company from reputational damage. Marcus rubbed sleep from his eyes, trying to process corporate warfare tactics before coffee. What do you need from me? Nothing. This is my fight. A pause. But Marcus, whatever happens today, thank you for what you've given Sophia. And me. That matters regardless of how this board vote goes. The call ended before he could respond. Marcus spent Friday morning building furniture in his apartment because his hands needed something to do that wasn't punching walls. Around noon, Tommy showed up with sandwiches and news. Kelly talked to Principal Martinez. School 43 is offering to provide testimony about Sophia's progress if Rebecca needs it for legal proceedings. They've got documented evidence of developmental improvements, social integration, academic engagement, all metrics that show whatever you're doing is working. Marcus accepted a sandwich he couldn't taste. Thomas isn't interested in evidence. He's interested in winning. Then maybe it's time to change the game he's playing. The idea that formed in Marcus's mind was probably terrible. It definitely violated multiple clauses in his employment contract. But sitting in his apartment waiting for board votes felt like surrender, and Marcus had learned from Lily that sometimes you had to make noise instead of accepting silence. He texted Rebecca. Where's the board meeting? Sterling Technologies headquarters. Conference room A. Why? What time? 3 p.m. Marcus, what are you planning? Showing up. Testifying if they'll let me. Making them look at what they're trying to destroy. They won't allow you in the room. Then I'll stand outside it where they can see me through the glass walls. They can vote to terminate me while looking at my face. The response took 3 minutes. That's either brilliant or insane. Probably both. I'll text you if they agree to let you speak. Marcus drove to School 43 at 2:30, arriving as dismissal began. Sophia emerged with Emma, her face brightening when she saw his truck in the parking lot. She ran to him with Winston clutched against her chest, signing rapidly. You came back. Mama said you would, but I didn't believe her. Marcus knelt to her eye level, signing carefully. I will always come back. Always. Even when things get complicated. Where were you? Dealing with adults who don't understand what we're building. But I'm here now. Sophia hugged him hard enough to restrict breathing. Over her shoulder, Marcus saw Rebecca's Lexus pull into the lot. She emerged wearing the charcoal suit that signaled corporate warfare, hair pulled back in executive severity expression, controlled despite obvious exhaustion. She approached slowly, signing while speaking so Sophia could follow both. The board meeting is in 20 minutes. They're voting on whether Marcus can continue working with you. Sophia's face crumpled. Why? He's helping me. Some adults think there are better ways to help. They're wrong, but they have power to make decisions. That's not fair. Rebecca knelt beside Marcus, bringing herself to Sophia's eye level. No, it's not fair. But sometimes we have to fight for what matters, even when it's not fair. Sophia looked between them, her mother who'd resigned from running a company rather than lose Marcus, and the carpenter who'd taught her that silence wasn't shame. Her small face set with determination that suggested she'd inherited Rebecca's stubbornness. I'm coming with you. Rebecca blinked. Sweetheart board meetings are... I'm coming. They're deciding about me. I should be there. Marcus caught Rebecca's eye over Sophia's head. She looked uncertain, protective instincts warring with recognition that her daughter was right. These decisions affected Sophia more than anyone, and excluding her from the process just reinforced the pattern of adults making choices without consulting the person most impacted. She's right. They should see what they're voting on. Rebecca's expression cycled through doubt and fear before settling on resolve. Okay, but you stay with me the entire time, and if it gets too intense, we leave immediately. They drove to Sterling Technologies in separate vehicles, Rebecca and Sophia in the Lexus, Marcus following in his truck. The downtown tower loomed against October sky like a monument to wealth's ability to reshape landscapes. Marcus parked in visitor parking and took the elevator to 52, with Sophia holding his hand, and Rebecca carrying a leather portfolio that probably contained documentation of Thomas's harassment. Grace Chen met them in the executive lobby, her expression suggesting she'd witnessed enough corporate drama to recognize historical moments. "They're waiting." Thomas tried to bar Marcus from the floor, but Rebecca invoked her shareholder rights to bring witnesses. "It's going to be ugly." "It's already ugly. We're just making it visible." The conference room held 15 people arranged around a table that could seat 30. Board members occupied chairs with the territorial certainty of people accustomed to power. Thomas Whitmore sat at the far end, silver hair-catching afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. His expression when Marcus entered with Sophia and Rebecca was worth every risk this gamble entailed. Linda Chen, the new acting CEO, gestured to empty chairs. "Ms. Sterling, you're welcome to present your position before we vote. You have 15 minutes. Rebecca remained standing, positioning herself where everyone could see her clearly. Sophia stayed close to Marcus Winston, clutched in both hands, watching adults who would decide her future. "I'm not here to present a position. I'm here to present evidence." She pulled documents from her portfolio and distributed them around the table. Board members examined the papers with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. These are communication logs between board member Thomas Whitmore and several media outlets obtained legally through Sterling Technologies' internal systems. They document Mr. Whitmore's efforts to leak confidential information about company investigations to journalists in order to manufacture scandal around my parenting decisions. Thomas's face darkened. "Those communications are protected by nothing. You used company email servers and company phones to conduct a personal vendetta. That voids any privacy expectations." Rebecca's voice stayed level but carried steel underneath. "Also included text messages from Mr. Whitmore to me personally, threatening to scrutinize Marcus Kane's background and destroy our arrangement. Messages from Mr. Whitmore to Dr. Patricia Morrison coordinating testimony for the anonymous complaint, and communications with Blackwell and Associates, arranging legal representation for filing allegations that the subsequent investigation proved false." The room went very quiet. Board members studied the documents with increasing alarm. Linda Chen's expression suggested she was recalculating power dynamics in real time. Thomas stood his chair, scraping against imported marble. "This is a witch hunt. Rebecca has been compromised by maternal desperation, and she's targeting anyone who questions her judgment. My judgment was questioned legitimately. Your methods were not." Rebecca pulled out another document. "This is a letter from School 43 Principal Sarah Martinez detailing Sophia's progress since enrolling in their integrated program 1 week ago. Developmental improvements, social integration, academic engagement. All metrics showing that Marcus's approach is working where 18 months of conventional therapy failed." She set the letter on the table. "And this," she pulled out her phone, pulling up video, "is security footage from my home showing Sophia signing conversations with Marcus, teaching her stuffed elephant ASL vocabulary, laughing for the first time in 2 years. None of which happened during 18 months of speech therapists you approved." The video played on the conference room's display screen. Sophia animated, engaged, communicating complex thoughts through hands that moved with increasing confidence. Board members watched with expressions suggesting they were seeing someone's daughter instead of a problem requiring institutional solutions. Thomas's voice cut through the silence. "This is emotional manipulation. Sob stories don't change the fact that Sterling Technologies faces liability exposure from Ms. Sterling's decision to employ an unqualified individual with unsupervised access to her child. The investigation cleared him completely. Investigations can be fooled. Background checks miss things. Credentials matter because they provide accountability." That Sophia moved. She walked to the center of the conference room where everyone could see her clearly, set Winston on the table, and began signing. Her hands moved with deliberate precision, forming words that required no verbal translation, because her meaning transcended language barriers. She signed about fear, about silence, about watching her father die and learning that words were dangerous, about 18 months of people trying to make her talk when talking hurt too much. Then she signed about Marcus, about learning that hands could speak, about building blanket forts and teaching Winston vocabulary, and discovering that other kids communicated the same way. About her mother learning sign language because Sophia mattered more than convenience. Board members watched a 6-year-old deliver testimony more compelling than any legal brief. Some looked uncomfortable. Others appeared moved. Thomas's face had gone pale. Sophia finished signing and looked directly at Thomas Whitmore. Then she formed one more sign, a gesture Marcus had taught her that meant, "You don't understand." Rebecca stepped forward, voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "My daughter just told you that she doesn't need fixing. She needs understanding. Marcus provided that understanding when every credentialed expert I hired failed to do so." She paused. "Thomas is correct that I'm compromised. I'm compromised by realizing I spent 2 years prioritizing institutional approval over actually listening to my child. I'm compromised by understanding that sometimes the right answer doesn't come from people with degrees on their walls." She looked at Marcus. "I'm compromised by gratitude to someone who gave me my daughter back." Linda Chen cleared her throat. "I think we've heard enough for an informed vote. All in favor of permanently terminating Marcus Kane's employment with Sterling Technologies, raise your hands." One hand went up. Thomas Whitmore's. All opposed, 13 hands. Even board members who'd supported Thomas earlier had apparently found their limit. Linda's expression was carefully neutral. "Motion fails. Mr. Kane's employment continues under current terms." She turned to Thomas. "However, we need to discuss your use of company resources for personal vendettas. That conversation happens in executive session. Everyone else is dismissed." The meeting dissolved into motion. Board members gathered belongings and departed with the efficient speed of people escaping uncomfortable situations. Marcus stood frozen while reality recalibrated around him. He'd won. Sophia had won. Rebecca had turned Thomas's weapons against him with documentation and video evidence and the simple power of a child telling truth that adults couldn't refute. Thomas remained seated, his silver hair catching autumn light through windows 52 floors above Indianapolis. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. A man who'd confused institutional power with actual authority and discovered the difference too late. Rebecca guided Sophia toward the exit. As they passed Thomas's chair, Sophia paused and signed something directly to him. Marcus caught the gesture. "You should learn to listen." Then she took her mother's hand and walked out of the conference room like a 6-year-old who'd just taught a master class in courage. In the hallway, Rebecca sagged against the wall, adrenaline draining away to leave exhaustion in its wake. "That was terrifying." "That was perfect." Marcus knelt to Sophia's level. "You were so brave in there." "Was I good?" "You were amazing. You told them the truth and they had to listen." Sophia hugged him, then hugged her mother, then insisted Winston hug both of them. Grace appeared with water bottles and information that Thomas was being escorted from the building, pending review of ethics violations. "Linda wants to talk to both of you next week about formalizing the arrangement. Something about creating a pilot program for alternative childcare support." Grace smiled. Apparently, watching a 6-year-old school the board made her reconsider what Sterling Technologies should be funding. Marcus and Rebecca looked at each other over Sophia's head. Something passed between them. Recognition of having survived corporate warfare and come out the other side with what mattered intact. "Thank you," Rebecca signed and spoke simultaneously. "For what? For not leaving, for fighting, for showing Sophia that some people keep their promises." Marcus thought about Lily's flashcards and blanket forts and the particular mathematics of grief that somehow made helping others hurt less than helping yourself. I told her I'd always come back. I meant it. They left Sterling Technologies together, Carpenter CEO and child who'd learned to speak with her hands. Outside, October afternoon stretched golden across downtown Indianapolis, where autumn was transforming trees into fire. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a converted warehouse in Fountain Square that used to manufacture industrial equipment and now housed something entirely different. The space had been renovated with money from Rebecca's personal foundation walls, painted warm colors windows, letting in natural light rooms configured for small group learning rather than mass production. The sign outside read, "Lily's Voice Foundation, where silence speaks volumes." Principal Martinez stood beside him reviewing the curriculum they'd developed. "We've got 40 families on the waiting list already. Parents who've spent years trying conventional therapy and finally found something that meets their kids where they are instead of demanding they change." Marcus watched through glass walls where Sophia and Emma were teaching a group of 5 children basic ASL vocabulary. Sophia moved with confidence he'd never have predicted 6 months ago, her hands forming shapes that other kids mimicked with varying accuracy but universal enthusiasm. Winston sat on a nearby shelf presiding over the classroom with quiet dignity. "Tommy did good work on the renovations." "He did. And Kelly's curriculum design is brilliant, integrating ASL with reading and math so kids learn that communication isn't limited to verbal language." Rebecca appeared carrying coffee from the Fountain Square shop that Marcus had introduced her to 6 months ago. She'd traded designer suits for jeans and sweaters most days, though she still maintained her board advisory role at Sterling Technologies 3 days a week. The foundation consumed the rest of her time fundraising outreach program development. Channel 8 wants to do a feature story next month, something about innovative approaches to childhood trauma. Marcus accepted the coffee. "Will they want interviews? Probably, but we control the narrative this time. No more Thomas Whitmore leaking selective information to manufacture scandal." Thomas had resigned from Sterling Technologies board in November after ethics investigation findings became public. Last Marcus heard, he'd retreated to his Connecticut estate, where old money insulated him from consequences. The company thrived without him. Linda Chen had implemented flexible work policies and expanded parental leave and proven that Fortune 500 success didn't require sacrificing employee well-being. Sophia emerged from the classroom signing that she was hungry. Rebecca responded in ASL that had become fluent through 6 months of daily practice. They conducted entire conversations now without verbal language, mother and daughter finally speaking the same tongue. "Can Marcus come to dinner tonight?" Rebecca glanced at him, a question in her eyes that went beyond dietary planning. "If he wants to." Marcus had been having dinner with them 3 or 4 nights a week since January. His Fountain Square apartment still contained Lily's flashcards and photos, but he'd added new pictures too. Sophia and Emma at the foundation's opening ceremony, Rebecca signing with students. Winston wearing various outfits Sophia insisted were necessary for different occasions. "Always," he signed back. They walked to the parking lot where Marcus's truck sat beside Rebecca's Lexus. 6 months ago, they'd been employer and employee navigating corporate politics. Now they were something else, something neither had defined, but both understood. Emma ran up with her mother trailing behind. Kelly Sullivan had started volunteering at the foundation 2 afternoons a week, teaching reading integration alongside ASL instruction. "Sophia, ask your mom if you can sleep over Friday. We're having a movie night and Emma insists it's not complete without you." Sophia signed the request. Rebecca considered, then nodded permission. The girls celebrated with enthusiasm that required no translation. Tommy appeared from the foundation's back office where he'd been installing new cabinets. "Last one's up. We're officially done with renovations." Marcus surveyed the converted warehouse that had become something Lily would have loved, a place where deaf and hearing kids learned together, where sign language was normal instead of remedial, where silence was valued instead of pathologized. Dad would have liked this project. The words emerged unexpectedly. Marcus hadn't talked about his father in years, the Youngstown carpenter who'd taught him to listen to wood and to honor silence. But standing in this warehouse-turned-learning center, he felt his father's presence alongside Lily's. Tommy squeezed his shoulder. He'd be proud. Building something that lasts longer than furniture. That night, Marcus and Rebecca sat on her condo's patio while Sophia slept inside exhausted from a day of teaching other kids her language. October had become April-autumn's cold replaced by spring warmth that made evening air soft enough to sit outside without jackets. I got a call from the governor's office yesterday. Marcus looked over his coffee cup. About what? They want to fund a pilot program expanding Lily's voice to 3 more Indiana cities. State money oversight from Education Department potential to become permanent if outcomes support it. That's incredible. It's terrifying. Scaling something this personal into a statewide initiative means losing some control over how it develops. Marcus thought about Lily's flashcards that had started this entire journey, small hands pressed into tempera paint preserved under laminate that had started to peel. Teaching one child had become teaching 40. Teaching 40 was becoming teaching hundreds. Lily taught me that sometimes you have to let go of things you built so other people can use them. That's how impact works. Rebecca absorbed this, her hands moving through the sign for understand with fluency that had required 6 months of daily practice to achieve. Do you ever regret it? Walking into that conference room last October, everything that came after. Marcus considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, he'd been a grieving carpenter volunteering at deaf schools to avoid confronting his daughter's death. Now, he ran a foundation bearing her name, taught ASL to families desperate for alternatives to conventional therapy, and spent evenings on patios with a woman who'd sacrificed her career to protect her daughter's healing. No. Do you regret resigning? Not even slightly. Sterling Technologies is doing better without me in charge daily. Linda's implementing changes I was too afraid to try. Rebecca smiled. Turns out, I was never as essential as I thought. You were essential, just not to the company. To Sophia. They sat in comfortable silence while spring darkness settled over Meridian Hills. Through the condo's windows, Marcus could see Sophia asleep on the couch, with Winston, both of them positioned in a shaft of lamplight that made them look like subjects in a painting about peace. Rebecca followed his gaze. She asked me yesterday if you were going to stay forever. Marcus's chest tightened. What did you tell her? That I hoped so. Was that presumptuous? He thought about the moment 6 months ago when he'd told Rebecca this arrangement was temporary, that he'd leave once mother and daughter could communicate. He'd meant it as protection against attachment. But Sophia had bypassed his defenses with the same efficiency she'd bypassed 18 months of speech therapy. And somewhere along the way, teaching Rebecca sign language had become teaching her how to rebuild herself after loss. Somewhere along the way, honoring Lily's memory had transformed from preservation into continuation. No, it wasn't presumptuous. Rebecca's hand found his across the patio table. Not romantic exactly, but not purely professional either. Something in between partnership built from shared purpose and mutual understanding, and the particular bond that forms between people who've survived warfare together. Lily would have loved what we built. Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd walked away from Fortune 500 power to learn her daughter's language, who'd weaponized documentation against board members trying to destroy their arrangement, who'd funded a foundation with money that could have purchased comfort but chose impact instead. Yeah, she would have. Inside the condo, Sophia stirred in her sleep. Marcus watched her settle back into dreams, clutching Winston, with the certainty of a child who'd learned that some people kept their promises, even when everything seemed designed to force them away. His phone buzzed. Text from Tommy Kelly wants to know if you're bringing Rebecca to the cookout Sunday. Emma's asking Sophia. Apparently, they've decided we're all family now, and resistance is futile. Marcus showed Rebecca the message. She laughed actual laughter that sounded natural instead of rusty. Tell them we'll be there, but only if I can bring dessert. Your friend Tommy's grilling is excellent, but his pie game needs work. Marcus texted confirmation while thinking about found family and chosen connections, and the ways love rebuilt itself in new configurations after loss tore apart the old ones. James watched from a photo on Rebecca's mantel. Lily smiled from Marcus's phone background. The dead didn't leave just because the living continued forward. April stretched into May. The foundation expanded from 40 families to 70. Channel 8 ran their feature story, which generated enough attention that Marcus had to hire additional staff to handle intake requests. Sophia finished first grade at School 43 with academic marks that suggested she'd been thriving the entire time. She just needed a classroom that valued what she could do instead of focusing on what she couldn't. Tommy and Kelly's daughter Emma started helping teach younger kids at the foundation, developing the particular authority that comes from being slightly older and vastly more confident. The girls remained inseparable best friends who'd bonded over sign language before their parents figured out they were building something larger than friendship. One Saturday in June, Marcus brought a wooden box to the foundation's opening ceremony for their second location. Inside Lily's original flashcards, her handprints in tempera paint the artifacts he'd sealed after her funeral and opened again to teach Sophia. He mounted them in a glass display case in the lobby with a plaque that read, "In memory of Lily Kane, who taught us that silence speaks volumes and love requires no sound." Rebecca stood beside him while the case was unveiled. Her hand found his, no longer tentative, no longer questioning, just connection between people who'd learned to rebuild themselves through helping others heal. Sophia and Emma pressed their faces against the glass, examining Lily's handprints with reverence appropriate for sacred relics. "She was your daughter," Emma signed. "Yes, she taught you our language, she did. And now I'm teaching it to everyone else." Sophia looked up at him with dark eyes that missed nothing. "That's how you keep her alive. By sharing what she gave you." The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Marcus nodded because speaking would require more voice control than he currently possessed. That evening, after the ceremony concluded and families departed, and the new location stood empty except for furniture and hope, Marcus sat alone in the classroom where Sophia had first taught other kids sign language. His phone held photos of Lily that he'd finally made peace with looking at regularly. Her 4th birthday. Her last Christmas. Her face in hospital beds and playgrounds, and ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable until they became precious through retrospection. Rebecca found him there sitting in child-sized furniture designed for students a quarter his size. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just thinking about how weird it is that the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing I've done." She sat beside him, their knees touching because the chairs forced proximity. Grief is strange mathematics. It doesn't erase itself. It just transforms into different shapes if you're willing to let it. Marcus thought about Thomas Whitmore's text from 6 months ago threatening to scrutinize his background and destroy their arrangement. About board meetings and anonymous complaints and institutional power deployed against individual connection. About a 6-year-old standing in a conference room signing truth that adults couldn't refute. We won. We survived. That's a different kind of winning. Through the windows, Indianapolis stretched across June twilight, city lights beginning their nightly emergence like stars deciding to participate in terrestrial existence. Somewhere out there, 70 families were learning that communication transcended verbal language. Somewhere out there, children were discovering that silence wasn't shame. And here in Fountain Square, in a converted warehouse bearing his daughter's name, Marcus Kane finally understood what honoring Lily's memory actually meant. Not preservation, continuation. Not holding on to what was lost. Sharing what she'd given him. not surviving, living. Rebecca leaned against his shoulder, with the comfortable weight of someone who'd earned the right to take up space in his grief. Outside the foundation's windows, summer darkness settled over neighborhoods where wealth and poverty existed in uncomfortable proximity. Inside this converted warehouse, wooden furniture bore Tommy's craftsmanship and Kelly's curriculum design, and Principal Martinez's educational expertise, and Rebecca's foundation funding, and Marcus's determination to transform loss into purpose. But underneath all of it, the floorboards and the pedagogy and the organizational structure lay Lily's handprints in tempera paint, small hands that had taught her father to listen to silence, small hands that had created a language Marcus now shared with hundreds of families, learning that love required no sound. His daughter was gone. That truth remained unchangeable, but her voice, the language she'd taught him through gesture and patience, and the particular courage of children who refused to let disability define them. Her voice spoke through every sign Marcus taught, every classroom he built, every family that discovered communication transcended words. Some legacies lived in monuments. Others lived in the quiet revolution of people learning to hear what silence said. Lily's legacy was both, and Marcus finally understood that he could honor her memory by living, instead of just surviving, by loving, instead of just remembering, by building, instead of just preserving. Rebecca's hand found his in the darkness. Sophia and Emma's laughter echoed from somewhere deeper in the foundation where they'd stayed late, playing games that required no verbal explanation. And for the first time since his daughter died, Marcus Kane allowed himself to imagine a future where grief coexisted with joy, where loss transformed into purpose, where memory became movement instead of paralysis. Outside Indianapolis continued its uneven march through summer. Inside Lily's Voice Foundation, silence spoke volumes about hope and healing and the particular courage required to keep building after everything collapses. The story wasn't finished. It never would be. But tonight, surrounded by wooden furniture and signed languages and found family built from shared understanding, Marcus Kane allowed himself to believe that maybe the best chapters were still being written, one small hand at a time,